Okay, you are watching Court for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Sunday, March 13th, 2022, at around 11 p.m. And today, I can see the lighting is a little bright. Hold on, give me a second. We'll come right back after I fix this. Okay, there we go, a little bit better. Let me know in the chat if the audio and video is coming through okay. So, today we're going to play the print and play demo case for Bureau of Investigation, subtitled Investigations into Arkham and Elsewhere. And this is going to be a little unusual, both because of the nature of what we're playing, a demo case for a game, but also because this has been played on a couple other YouTube channels already, so there's not so much. We're playing this more for ourselves than to communicate information. And I think what we'll do is we'll use this as an excuse to talk about this genre a little bit, talk about the nature of these games, who they appeal to, and some of the challenges. And we'll try to put this stuff in context before and after we play this demo case. Let me know in the chat if you can. Okay, so Jonathan Warner is here as usual. He says he can hear me. Okay. All right. And Duke of Zill, who's been the one who's really, I'm excited for this game to come out as well. And Duke of Zill is really excited, and he's the one who has been pushing for us to play this, but he's not going to be around for the playthrough, but maybe at the end. And I've been talking a little bit to Gregory Privat, who's the author of this game. He may stop in at some point, say hello, offer any comments. Okay, so let's set let's give a little background to this before we play it. First of all, this game is out. It's available, originally written in French, Gregory's French. There's actually a long history of the Sherlock Holmes games, consulting detective expansions being written in French first and then translated back. Originally, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective was an American game created by Gary Grady and Suzanne Goldberg. I believe I'm getting, but they got married at some point, so maybe it doesn't matter so much. Anyway, 1981, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is created by them out in California, San Francisco, in their own little company, publishing in their own little press in little loose leaf binders, and sent out with their own little newsletter. And it caught on, and then the French reprinted it, then Americans reprinted it in a couple different versions. You can see behind me, in addition to Sleuth Publications, which was the original, right behind me on this side is the Yastari version that came out. That, I think, was the real revival in America for this game, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And then Space Cowboys came and reprinted the whole series, and you can see a bunch of them. There's Dave Neal's Baker Street Irregulars box, and then over here you've got Carlton House and Jack the Ripper. And those big boxes, which are very highly produced, beautiful boxes, and beautiful contents, very lovingly recreated, reprinted various expansions that had come out and added some new cases. So, for example, the Red Jack the Ripper and West End Adventures reprinted West End Adventures expansion, which was out a long time ago, and then added some new Jack the Ripper cases. We've talked about those. Dave Neal's box, the green one over there, is all new cases written by Dave Neal. Okay, so that Dave Neal's box is 2020. So Space Cowboys has really been responsible for this reinvigorating this Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective series. And Bureau of Investigation is published by Space Cowboys. I believe they're French in origin, but unfortunately, the American version I can't get hold of yet. So you may find YouTube channels. It's available in France and England. So if you want to watch reviews of it, it may come first from overseas, but we'll get hold of it as soon as we can and play it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of playing it live on the stream at some point. But okay, this is going to be a long discussion. So if you're here just to play this print and play case, that's not what you're going to get. We're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about this and before and after. If you do want to play it though, this is a perfect opportunity to stop watching, go download the print and play copy yourself and play it by yourself, or download it. And when we start playing in 10 or 15 minutes, you can play it along with us. Okay, so but back up a little bit of history. So we've played on this channel lots of these Sherlock Holmes cases, including one of perhaps my favorite Sherlock Holmes consulting detective experience, and one of my top experiences playing any board game, which was the Adventures by Gaslight expansion, which is behind me here. And it's epic, long marathon, super difficult. We spent 45 hours over 7 or 8 streams playing it, and then wrote a little 45-page, not so little PDF sort of accessory if you want to play the game. It's out of print, but you can buy it on eBay for about $90. And you could download our PDF if you want to sort of enhance your experience of the game. So that is all to say that I love this system. I love this genre. It's a storytelling mystery game. It's a reading game. You're reading paragraphs as you play, as you'll see. And you're in it as much for the reading as you are for the solving mysteries. Different people come at this genre for different reasons. Some people really want to be challenged in their intellect to sort of solve an inductive or deductive challenge. Some people are in it just for the storytelling and the dialogue and the historical fun of traveling back in time. Some people are here for a bit of a mix. I'm here for a mix. I think so is Jonathan, but I put pretty heavy emphasis on the storytelling part of it and the mental enjoyment of trying to solve it. But I don't care that much about the actual end solution to the mystery. We'll talk about, before we start playing, how Bureau of Investigation is different from Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, both in terms of mechanics, there are some differences, and in terms of sort of what the emphasis and focus is on. But first, let me continue with the history lesson a little bit more. So, in addition to the Sherlock Holmes series and the expansions, a bunch of spin-offs came out. Some published by the same company, Sleuth Publications, and some by other companies. So behind me here, you see Gumshoe, which was sort of a film noir detective in the 30s game. And that's one of the biggest, most epic, ambitious spin-offs of the Sherlock Holmes system. It's, again, out of print. You can't buy it except on eBay, but you can find copies on eBay. It's an amazing experience. I played some of it live on the stream, and you can find a couple of reviews by me. It's a very special experience, and you have to have some real stamina, but it's amazing. So the next of that is an Ellery Queen game, which is sort of a simplified, reduced, inspired game starring Ellery Queen Detective, which was a series of mystery novels set in New York City. And I played one of those on the channel live, but we might get back to playing some more of those at some point. Now, that brings us to the most close relative of Bureau of Investigation, which is Mythos Tales, which you see there. Mythos Tales. Mythos Tales was created by Hal Eccles, I believe is the author, and got its genesis on Board Game Geek as a fan expansion, and then was picked up by a company, Seventh Continent or Eighth Continent, and then sold through Kickstarter in the early days of Kickstarter. And it probably doesn't get the love it deserves. And we played one of the cases live on stream, and maybe we'll get around to playing some more. But the connections between Mythos Tales and Bureau of Investigation are right up front. They're both set in the world of H.P. Lovecraft. Mythos Tales veers a little bit off, is a little more varied perhaps, but so set in that world of horror type science fiction-y H.P. Lovecraft stuff. And Mythos Tales actually includes a couple of the mechanics that you saw expanded upon by Dave Neal, in terms of when sometimes you go to a place and you are told to take a card that signifies you've gathered some evidence or you've been someplace. And then when you read some things, it'll say, if you have marker S, then read this, otherwise read that. And Mythos Tales, another connection between Mythos Tales and Bureau of Investigation is some experimenting with time and scores. So Mythos Tales has an interesting time mechanic. Time passes between afternoon and evening and goes through a series of days. So depending on the case, you might have 10 turns, and the turns progress you through different days from morning, night, morning, night, morning, night. And different things might happen depending if it's morning or night. And Mythos Tales experiments in a couple other ways too. There's certain things like you might go to a place and lose a sanity point. And then when you get to the end of the game, this is where this sort of gets important. So in Mythos Tales, you only have a certain amount of time, certain number of leads you can follow. Mythos Tales actually counts a lead if you go someplace and nothing's there, where Bureau of Investigation doesn't. But in Mythos Tales, when you use up the number of turns you're allowed, you go to the end. The end asks you a bunch of questions, a whole bunch of questions. The first case has got like 15 questions or so. Then you turn the page and you get the answers to your questions, and you score depending on how many answers you got correct. And then you score some penalty if you had to look at too many leads. And then you get a penalty maybe for if you went someplace and lost sanity. And then you got your score. And then you read the solution. Okay. So questions, then you're told the answers and you get your score for the answers. Then you calculate a score, which is based on how many questions you got right and how long it took you, and various other things like sanity. And then you read the solution from Professor Armitage to tell you how he solved it. And you might get penalized if it took you too much more than him. And then you could look at your score and it'll tell you if you got in a certain range, then you did great. Okay. And in case you aren't experienced with the Sherlock Holmes consulting detective cases, in general, the way those work are a simplified version of scoring. You get to the end, you get a couple questions, and then Holmes tells you his solution and how many leads you could have gotten it if you did optimally, which you never will, and then you might calculate your score. All right. So that's Mythos Tales, and now let's talk about the system of Bureau Investigation before we start playing, and what's different, what's interesting. Okay, so there are a couple things that are new about Bureau of Investigation. Let's start at the end, though, because that's one of the interesting points. Bureau of Investigation is mystery. There is a mystery involved, but it doesn't ask you to answer questions at the end. Remember, I'm basing this on the rules that have been published and discussion about the game. There are some discussions on BGG from people who have the game, but my understanding of the game, this may change when I get hold of the actual copy, but essentially, when you get to the end of Bureau of Investigation, there's an interesting change. Rather than giving you a quiz that you have to answer, you're challenged to pick a location to go to neutralize the threat. Something like that. Solve the, not show that you understand the solution or the mystery, but sort of using the information you've gained to figure out how to avert it. Okay, in the demo case, as I understand it, we'll get to the end, which is a time limit, and then we'll pick one place to go, and then we'll get a score based on where we go. In the actual cases, I believe there are 5 in the real box, you pick 3 places to go, and then you add up your score from those 3 places. So it may be that some places have to do with side quests and you'll get a couple points. You may go places and get 0, etc. Okay, you're at the end, you run out of time, you pick your 3 places, or in the demo 1, and then you read what happens when you go to this final place. Maybe you've averted the danger, maybe you've saved the world, maybe you've made a mistake. The game will give you that little paragraph and give you a score. You'll check out your score, you'll add up the 3 places, or the 1 in this case, to find out if you've won or not. So the rules say something like 7 points is a victory, whatever. It's always, it's a standard score that you get to win the game. Okay, anyway, that's not the important point. The important point is, if you get a high enough score by picking the right places, then you've won, and you would naturally then read the story finale, the solution, the explanation, the story finale. What's interesting, though, is unlike all the Sherlock Holmes and Mythos tales, if you picked wrong places, if you went places that don't solve the problem, you're not told you should have gone here. You're told you didn't do it. You didn't save it. And at that point, you could choose to say, okay, we lost. Let's read this. Let's read the solution, what we should have done, the way you would with Sherlock Holmes. But because you're not given the answers, you could stop, rewind, come back another day, or restart immediately and take another 15 turns and try to go down different paths, get a better score or get a good enough score. So that is actually, there's 2 things fascinating about that. This idea that, in general, these games are non-replayable. They're mysteries and stories. You wouldn't, once you finish it and read the solution, you wouldn't ever play it again. But the idea that you've got a time limit here, a fairly tight time limit if we're to believe the discussion, and then the opportunity to try again without being told the answer. That's really quite a clever and interesting idea. And then there's this additional idea that at the end you're not being asked questions to show how well you understand it, but you're asked to operationalize your knowledge to decide where to go. Now, I think that is a brilliant idea on its own. It's an idea that it looked like Ignacy Trzewiczek was going to experiment with his detective evolutions into Vienna Connection and Dune House Secrets, but never quite did. But it seems to be a richer, provide some richer possibilities. Instead of just asking you, do you know who did it? It's saying like, what do you want to do now? How would you solve this? That requires you to figure out probably who did it and why or whatever the mystery is, but then go one step further and say, what should we do about this? And maybe even at least the possibility for making some psychological choices, like, well, we know this person's the person who did it, but maybe we're aligned with them, so we're going to let them go and track down this person. It's as a system, it offers the possibility to make sort of moral choices, psychological choices. How much that's happened in this game, I don't know, but I think it's a really nice idea and very clever in that it doesn't have to give you the answer before it gives you the score. So it gives you the option to say, okay, we messed that up and go back. I think that's especially important because on face value, I'm not a huge fan of the time limit thing. Some people really like the idea of having a time limit. And remember, we're not talking about like clock time. We're not talking about you have an hour, but you have a certain number of leads that you can read, and then you have to solve it. In this game, in Mythos Tales, it's very similar, but not quite. In Sherlock Holmes, it's almost never a strict time limit. In Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective System, almost all of the cases are take as much time as you want, but your score is you're gonna be dinged for taking too long. Okay. In general, I'm playing these for the story, and I tend to be a completionist. I want to read everything. So the idea of being forced to finish and answer it before I feel ready, early, is not super appealing to me, just as a player. Again, some people have the opposite view. They want to be challenged and it to be a game, and for that, they need to be forced to answer early. Okay. So my biases are slightly against the time limit, but the idea that it's sort of a soft time limit for this game in the sense that you can try to solve it when the game says you've run out of time. And then if you don't get it right, you could go back and spend as much time as you want and keep doing that until you get the right answer. So for me, that seems like a pretty good and intriguing compromise. All right, let's talk about another mechanical difference for the game. You probably, well, this is par for this channel, so this is what you're in for. Okay. Let's talk about another mechanical difference. In the Sherlock Holmes system and all of the spin-offs, the basic mechanic is that you, on each turn, remember it's fully cooperative, on each turn, you pick a place to go. And when you pick a place to go, you're picking a place on a map, or you're picking a person to go visit. So there are people in a directory. The directory is organized by name of people and also by categories. You could say, let's go to all the drugstores and see if the person bought some medicine at that drugstore. Or you could say, let's go to this person's house, see if they're home, what they have to say. You pick a person, which gives you a number or a neighborhood location. You turn to that item in the clue book and you read what they have to say or what you saw at that location, or you find that there's nothing there. Okay. All of the games work like that. Bureau of Investigation did something a little different, and it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. In Bureau of Investigation, every person you can visit, I believe it's only for when you visit people, not if you wanted to, like if you wanted to go to the hospital, you would just go to that hospital location. But most of the time you'll be visiting people, like you'll go see the doctor or this person who something happened to. Okay. When you choose to visit their location, you can go in one of two ways. And I was talking to Gregory, and he said that there's some people who have been playing the demo case so far have misunderstood a little bit about this. So let's make sure we explain this well, I hope. If Gregory's in the chat, he can chime in if I explain it wrong. But basically, let's say you wanted to go to the doctor's office because you heard something happen to him or you're suspicious of him. Or maybe we're going to the doctor's house. You can go in one of two ways. You can go in an interview mode or an investigation mode. And there's two separate sections of the clue book for these, for interviews versus investigations. If you go to the interview mode, you look up the location in the interview section, you are basically saying, I want to go talk to this person. So you're going on the front door, you're knocking, or you're calling to arrange a meeting so you could meet with them in person. You're explicitly going to talk to that person and arranging to talk to that person. That's the interview mode. If you choose to go visit that location or person in investigation mode, you're explicitly avoiding talking to them. So that might mean sneaking around the back of the house, looking in the windows, or following them, etc. You are explicitly avoiding conversation with them. You're sneaking and investigating. So some places and people will have both have an entry in interview and an entry in investigation. Some places and people will only have one or the other. You don't get penalized for looking up something and trying to investigate someone if there's no entry. So if there's no entry, you don't get penalized one of your 15 leads. But for some locations, both may be there, and you'd have to use 2 leads to go to both places. It's very intriguing. I have a little bit of a concern in terms of the fiddliness, especially if you're a completionist, of having to look up. It takes a little bit of time to go and find a place. And so I'm a little bit wary of having to do that twice for every place, but I suppose the premise we're buying into is that you're not meant to go everywhere in this game. You only have 15 leads, so you're going to have to be a little more careful about choosing what to do. And it does provide an interesting choice. Do you want to go talk to this person openly, or are you suspicious of them and you want to sneak around? So we're going to see how that's played. And it looks to me, in the demo case, everything is just printed here. Let's take a look. In the demo case, we've just got investigations followed by interviews, and I put a little tab where the investigations start. It looks to me like in the in the full game, it looks to me like they're actual tabs on the side. Gregory or someone who has the actual copy of the game can tell me if that's correct. So in the Space Cowboys editions, each case is in its own booklet, and it looks to me like the booklets are tabbed, not just for investigations and interviews, but by neighborhood. So the map is broken up into neighborhoods. That would be very welcome if you could just quickly tab to the side and say, I have an interview that's in the Northwest 22. You could just flip to Northwest interview section. That would make life a lot easier. And if they've done that, I'm very happy about that. I think that covers the main differences. Gregory, the rule book looks very nice and explains well that this is more of a focus on H.P. Lovecraft's world of sort of science fiction-y horror and not pure induction, deduction. So a little bit of mix, but maybe more of a focus on story and maybe even some side stories. Okay, how's that for a long historical and background view of this? But we're not done. I want to talk a little bit about... So I was talking to Gregory about how to think of the demo case and a little bit of concerns about people making judgments from watching a playthrough of the demo case, etc. You have to know that if you imagine you're a designer of a game and the game comes out, it's not yet available, and people start putting up playthroughs or reviews, maybe they review it based on playing half a case or they had a bad time. It has to be completely nerve-wracking. And the demo case is even more challenging because well, who is the demo case for? It's really not for people who completely are used to this genre, have played lots of Sherlock Holmes cases. So we're going into this, I think the fair way to do this demo case is meant to be short, simple, simplified, cut down, just to give you a flavor of the mechanics and the way the game works. And it's completely unreasonable to judge our subjective experience and enjoyment of playing this demo case as a reflection on the full game. We love long, drawn-out, 8-hour streams with the full pieces and the map that you're moving around, and it looks like Bureau of Investigation has little pieces of evidence similar to the Mystery Suspect game, so like the full experience. And this print and play demo case is not meant to be that. There is no map. It's going to be a short case. We're only getting one choice of answers. So the message is you can't judge the full game by the demo case. We're doing this mainly just to sort of wet our whistle, get a little taste of the game, talk a little bit about this stuff, but not judge the game based on this print and play. In fact, if you're a fan of this genre, as you can see I am, it's not like there are hundreds and hundreds of these kinds of games, and they're so fascinating to see the evolution and the different things that are tried. And unlike a different genre, this really is, these games do feel more of you're reading the voice of a writer and an artist. So for me, this game, this Bureau of Investigation, is basically an instant buy. It doesn't matter the experience of this print and play sample. It's, as a fan of this genre, I want to see what Gregory has done and how the stories unfold. And I'll give you a review eventually. I'm not, if I didn't like it or if it fell down in some areas, I will talk about those. It's not that it's going to be a great game no matter what, but it's worth buying and playing no matter what for me. So I just caution you not to make judgments on if you see the print and play and you've never played one of these games and you love it, then you'll probably love the real game. But if you look at this and say, oh, that was too simple, too short, wasn't enough of an experience, you can't make that judgment of the full game. That's even more true because as a genre, these mystery games are so subjective. If you, and maybe the people in the chat Jonathan, you can back me up on this. Your experience playing these mystery games, whether it's the Sherlock Holmes series or many of the other games we've played of this type, your experience is going to depend on sort of the mood you were in when you played, your expectations, and then the luck of how well you got on the wavelength that the author was on for a mystery. And that means that it's very hard to predict which cases in these games you're going to love or are going to fall flat for you. So of any genre, this is going to be one where you just have to try. And Jonathan is just reminding me that in the last game we played, we had sort of different feelings, even two of us sitting down at the same table playing the same game. So, lots of caveats before we start this game. With all that said, though, I am curious to see the feel of this print and play demo case. Anything I haven't covered that I should before we get started here? That is a long warm-up before playing. And I'll have to repeat it all when we review. Jonathan says, it can also depend on how you feel about a sub-genre element, like impossible locked rooms. Yeah, that's really true. One real place that cleaves people in these games is how important the final solution is in terms of you saying that's completely plausible, everything makes sense. it was fair, I should have been able to figure it out, and I did. And whether you figured it out has an effect on how well you liked it. Some people, though, are much more tolerant of, okay, that was a ridiculous answer, but I still had so much fun trying to think of a solution. And I'm more in that camp. All right, so here's what we'll do. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we will start playing Bureau of Investigation. So I will see you in 5 minutes. Okay, we're back. We're about to play the demo print and play case for Bureau of Investigation. Jonathan reminds me in the chat that we should probably point out that neither Jonathan nor myself are super H.P. Lovecraft fans, so we might miss a reference here or there. I've read some of it. I do like it, but some things may go over our heads. All right, let's take a look at what we've got here. Okay, The Disappearance of a Student is the name of this case. Welcome to the Bureau of Investigation, agents. Here are 5 very peculiar cases that will put your investigation talents and courage to the test. Bureau of Investigation, investigations in Arkham and elsewhere, is based on the rules of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and offers innovative options and tweaks. You don't need to have played Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective to enjoy this game. As a team, follow the leads, interview witnesses, examine documents, and reveal the threats looming over mankind. Good luck. 1 to 8 players, 14 plus, 90 minutes. I've read Gregory give estimates of the length and difficulty of the different cases, and some of them are long, which is very exciting. I look forward to those long ones. Okay, let's read this explanation here. This demo case is shorter and simpler than the ones included in the game. Read the introduction below to get started with this Bureau of Investigation demo. Then read several leads before turning to the intervention section. Each lead is numbered and can be visited in either interview mode, where you contact the individuals there, or investigation mode, where you try to obtain information in a roundabout way. Or both. You could do them both. Okay. If you do them both, it counts as 2 leads, obviously. Okay. It is recommended that you note the leads that you follow so you can reread them later, which we will do on paper. It doesn't cost you an additional lead. You don't have to remember stuff. You can reread stuff. And remember that in the demo, they're just numbers. In the real game, things are located in different neighborhoods of a map, just like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. In Bureau of Investigation, it looks like there are 2 main maps, Boston and Arkham, and then there's couple specific maps for specific cases. All right, let's read our introduction here. Introduction, U.S. Department of Justice, Bureau of Investigation, April 5, 1929, Arkham West Police Station. It's 6 a.m. on a rainy Friday morning, and as officers of the Arkham City Police Department, that means your shift starts now. You don't expect anything exciting from the day ahead. You find the same old piles of paperwork on your desks, and body odors still flow from the drunk tank. Before too long, Chief Burt calls you into his office. Hoping that a new case will put some distance between you and your paperwork, you hurry to the meeting. Professor Bernard Shaw of Miskatonic University came to see me last night. He wanted to report the disappearance of a diligent student of his, Albert Copper. He's been missing for the past 3 weeks. The professor stopped by Miss Charlene's boarding house, where Albert rents a room, but he wasn't there. I figure he's probably shacked up with some broad somewhere. But still, I promised him we'd look into it, and by we, I mean you. You have until tonight to find the guy. Got it? And then the game says you can read 10 leads before turning to the intervention section. So demo case, only 10 leads. And then it's making a suggestion. You wonder if it would be helpful to visit the central police station or the morgue. So let's just take a look at this at first. So this is nice. It's telling us. And this actual idea of bolding stuff, I believe, came from Mythos Tales. Was the first place I saw that used it. But it's basically saying when it mentions a place by name, it's bolding it so it's easy for us to recognize. But here are places that we've got 4 places in this case that are calling out to us. Miskatonic University, which we could go 1300. Charlene's boarding house, where he rents a room but he wasn't there. We could go to 1900 to read that. Or we could go to the central police station or the morgue. These are sort of look like the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective general allies. And I'll Jonathan in the chat says, let's go to the morgue and be pessimistic. All right, hold on. Before we go there, I don't believe that Bureau of Investigation has a standard set of allies the way Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and Mythos Tales do. Both of those games, and Gumshoe for that matter, and Ellery Queen for that matter, have a set of like, here's 10 places that you might go to in every case. You could visit the hospital, you could visit the criminologist. I don't think Bureau of Investigation does that, but you can see in the introduction, they're sort of giving us 2 general places that aren't mentioned in our sort of framing of the case, but might be general places. All right, so remember, we can only go to 10 places, but each place we could go there, knock on the door to talk to someone, or we could sneak around. I guess logically, you don't sneak around unless you have a reason to sneak around, right? Like, we're not going to go to the morgue and sneak around unless someone gives us a reason to need to sneak around. All right. Okay, so Bernard Shaw of Miskatonic. So presumably if we went there in interview mode, we could talk to Bernard Shaw and get more information from him. We can go to Charlene's boarding house, knock on the door, or we could try to sneak around and get a feel for if those are different. Or if the game is telling us, it might be useful to go to the Central Police Station or the morgue. I don't think we should be going to the morgue without some evidence that he's in the morgue. Because we only have 10. One of the things we're going to have to decide for today is what happens if we get to the end of this and we lose. Do we start right back over again and play again, or do we read the solution? I don't know. But it just seems not in keeping spirit. I mean, you could look at it both ways. If you're a PI and a case came to you, you might say, all right, let me just quickly call the morgue, make sure the person didn't wind up dead. But that would be a quick case, right? Ring, okay, they're there. Okay, sorry, case solved, he's dead. Police station might have some leads about something that happened. They might also know if someone was killed. So if I have to go to either place, I'd rather go to the police station before the morgue. Jonathan, I think the morgue is premature. Boarding house might be premature too. I say we go to the police station. We're police. That would be a natural thing for us to do. Check the police station. So I'm going to say we go to the police station first. So I'm going to circle this on this paper. If it was the game, you obviously wouldn't. But I'll just circle it to help us keep track. And I'll keep track on our list that the first place we went was 1400. And remember, we have to say now whether we're going there in interview mode or investigation mode. And it may be that those 2 terms are a little misleading, interview or investigation. I'm going to think of those as as sort of talk versus sneak around. So we're going to go to the police station and talk, which is interview mode. So I'm going to call that, let's call that I for interview. So we're going to go to interview mode of 1400. Now I saw on the Gaming Rules YouTube playthrough, I just quickly looked at how they were doing. He was doing something clever. He was blocking off clues that we're not supposed to read with this, because I always do worry that if you watch this, it's hard to, I mean, it is hard to avoid reading something and noticing something, but I saw he was blocking that off. All right, so let's see, 1400 interviews, and the interviews are up front. So the front is interviews. This might be useful to have it say interview. It says interviews here, you can see, but here it doesn't say interviews. So I'm just going to write interviews here so we know this is interview section. It's color coded too. The tan is interview and the darker is investigation. So we're going to go to interview or talk 1400. Okay, so here we go. Let's do it the way they did it. So blocking out stuff here. All right, so you don't get it's sort of important that you don't see the numbers either. Although in this case, for this game, you don't get penalized for looking up a number that doesn't exist, so it's no big deal. Okay, so we go to the police station. Max Senrick, a field staff sergeant, receives you in his office. He does not look down on you, and you appreciate that. You worked together several years ago and got along well. He offers to tip you off about Miss Charlene's boarding house. I see. We've dealt with 2 kids from there before. One of the Raxons. Gerald, I believe. I caught him pissing on a patrol car. He was drunk. He had a half-empty bottle of whiskey on him, but we let him off with a warning. When he's sober, he's a nice guy. There's also Emily Sundeer, a rebel too. She's into politics. A suffragette, as they say. But I never heard of Albert Copper. Then he adds in a low voice, but how many of you are investigating this case? I must confess that I met with a private eye. He was with the police 10 years ago, so we exchanged tips from time to time. He's a tall redhead with an improbable face. He also wanted information about the boarding house. Then there were 2 guys from Boston, military types. They told me they were from the interrogation office or something. Feds, I think. They were clearly looking for information about Albert. And now you. Can't be a coincidence. All right. Well, everyone's looking for Albert, and we got information about these 2 people. Now, if we were playing the full game with the full directory, we could then, if we thought it was important, look up Emily Sundeer and Gerald Raxon and try to meet with them. In this game, in the demo, there's no directory, so there's no people to look up. Another reason why the demo is not a measure of the full game. But, so we're going to use, in fact, let me use a paper here to keep track of the leads we've gone to. 1400, interview mode. And then I'll use notes to keep track of potential clues. So 1300 is Miskatonic. 1900, let's do it this way. 1900 is Charlene's boarding house. 1400 was Central Police. And 1200 was the morgue. Okay, so we went to the Central Police. So we'll put a little circle here. At least we went to it in interview mode. And no reason, right, for us to sneak around the police station. Okay, so these are potential clues, and then I'll use this for the actual clues we went to. We went through 1 of 10. And I think, I'm not sure why these games don't say this, but, you know, if you were new to this genre, there'd be no, you're not going to break anything if you decide, okay, for my group, for my family group, we're going to go to 12 places before we try to answer it. Depends how much of a challenge you want. All right, where to next? We could go to the boarding house. There's a lot of people on this case. It seems to me we should probably go to the university to find out what he was working on. Why is everyone trying to find this guy? What is he? He's a diligent student, Albert Copper. He's been missing for 3 weeks. That's a long time to be missing. I think we should go to the university and get some more background on what Albert is working on. And since the professor already went to the boarding house, he can pass us the information he discovered. Why do we have to duplicate his work? Let's just go to him, cut out the middleman. All right, so we're going to go to Miskatonic again in interview talk mode, right? Okay, so I'm going to circle 1300, and I'm going to write down our next clue, 1300 interview. Okay, so here's 1300. He doesn't look like he's got that much to say, unfortunately. Professor Bradshaw welcomes you into his office. I can't imagine Albert giving up on his studies. On the contrary, he is one of my most diligent and brilliant students. He asked him if there were any warning signs as to his disappearance. No, absolutely nothing. Admittedly, he had been tired for weeks, probably because of the personal work I require from my students. I think I am strict but fair. In any case, his disappearance is of great concern to me. Really? That's all he gave? That's all he's got to say? Totally useless. All right. So we could try to snoop around his office or the university. I don't see much of a reason for us to do that, but okay. So that did not give us any good information. No leads, no information on what he was studying. Okay, well, let me circle that. Well, it's either the boarding house, the morgue, or we start sneaking around. Jonathan, next one's up to you. John says, do we talk at the boarding house or just sneak around? We might need to do both. It's a good question. It does bring up one of the challenges with these games is that it's very hard to ever, you could always come up with a scenario where you should sneak around, or, you know, it depends how you're going to play it. Are you going to play it that you don't sneak unless you got a reason to sneak, or are you suspicious of everyone? But that's part of the fun of the sort of psychological element of these games, because I tend to play these games and I'm suspicious of everyone. So I feel like I want to go behind everyone's back and see. All right. Jonathan says we're going to go to the boarding house and talk. Let's do it. So our next place is boarding house, which is 1900, and we're going to talk. But we're leaving open the possibility we might sneak later. All right, 1900 interview mode. All right, there it is. Okay, I'm just copying the gaming rules system of hiding this stuff. You have to let me know whether you think it's wise. Miss Charlene's boarding house is a 3-story building whose windows, like eyes, give it an inquisitive look. It is located in a quiet area of Arkham, some 300 yards from the university. An ideal boarding house for students looking for a roof, cooked food, and some peace and quiet for a modest sum of money. You have to knock several times on the door before some small woman opens the door suspiciously. Then, dazzled by your gleaming uniforms, she lowers her guard and ushers you into her living room, which adjoins a kitchen smelling of herbs and stew. Quickly you realize that Miss Charlene speaks little and makes you repeat twice everything you ask her. Oh, you know my little students. They're a bit like children I never had. Well, yes, my husband died on the front in 1918. I was a nurse there in France, but I really couldn't do anything for him. I still blame myself, and I never started a new life. So instead, I take good care of my little ones. I cook good food for them and clean up after them when they leave dirt on the kitchen floor. I take my work seriously, and I keep things tidy here. You try asking her for the list of the boarding house tenants between 2 anecdotes about her job as a nurse during the war. On the 2nd floor, I have Gerald. He has quite a personality, that one. He reminds me of my husband in his youth. You'll find Rose's room on the same floor. She's very nice. You won't be able to talk to her. She's on vacation with her parents, as far as I know. On the 3rd floor, Emily occupies the room at the end of the hall, and on your left you'll find that of Darryl. Not much of a talker, that one, always in his books. Quite the opposite of Emily, who's the real devil, but always willing to give me a hand. She's a beautiful person. You'll find Albert's room on the top floor. Anyone will tell you that he's the most brilliant one of the bunch. His work is the only thing that matters to him, and that's only become more true in the past few months. Besides, it's quite simple. He works so much that I haven't seen him at all lately. If you want to talk to him, you should go and knock on his door. Before leaving, Miss Charlene hands you over a large bunch of keys and adds, I wrote the name of each student on the keys. It's better that way. I have memory problems, and for some years now, Before continuing your investigations, you take a quick tour of the ground floor. The living room is plain, only adorned with a carpet in red tones, and on the mantel, a photograph of a young couple, a soldier and a nurse. Miss Charlene's room is most ordinary. The garden is tiny and well maintained. The kitchen is full of food and utensils. A chopper placed next to two beautiful chickens draws your eyes to the table. Further away, you notice a large combination lock affixed to a door that probably leads to a pantry. And then we've got a map of the house. Okay, so we got a bunch of stuff here. You see the system. We've now discovered new potential leads, which we shall write down, and a map of the house and where people live. But in addition, it's clear that we've been given a little hint here. Further away, you notice a combination lock affixed to a door that probably leads to a pantry. So if we now go and sneak around this place, do the investigate mode, my assumption is it might be to investigate that stuff. But let us see. Let's write down these new places we have, these new things. So at the boarding house, which we've just gone to, boarding house, we've got some new clues opened up to us. These are the people who live there. We can do Gerald, 1921. Maybe I will, sorry, you're not supposed to read that. We'll just circle the ones we've been to here too. We went to 1900, we went to 1300, we went to 1200, okay. Okay, so Gerald, then we have Rose. Oops. So Gerald is on the second floor. Rose's room is right up there with him. There's Gerald. Gerald's room and Rose's room. Then we have Daryl. And then we have Emily. 31. And then Albert's room, which is 1941. All right. And anything about this layout? Tell us anything? Ground floor is Charlene's room and the kitchen. Gerald and Rose, Emily and Daryl, and Albert has the whole top floor. Okay, so Jonathan says, I guess we should investigate Alfred's room. And he also says, it's worth noting in this setup, we're just local police, right? So it adds a bit of psychological pressure to start by trying to interview before just sneaking around. We're not local police. We're part of this bureau, but I believe it is interesting. It is sort of framing it as we're local police, isn't it? Maybe we're part of this new bureau that's detached, that's attached to the local police or whatever. Okay, Jonathan says it would make sense for us to investigate Albert's room. I wish they weren't both I. I wish it wasn't investigate and interview, both I. I wish we should like investigate with a V or sneak around. Let's sneak. We've got the keys. So she's given us a way to sneak into every room. And who has she told us is absent? She said Rose is on vacation. So she would be one that we would just sneak around to. And then she says Emily's a real devil. Daryl's not much of a talker, that would suggest that we shouldn't try to talk to him. We should just sneak around. It's a little, we're still not 100% sure what to expect from the sneaking investigation. We're told that the idea is that that avoids talking to them, but we don't know if we could get caught doing that. Could we get caught when we're sneaking around someplace, or do we guarantee we're not getting caught? I guess you can't guarantee you're not getting caught, so you could get caught. But we do think that it's not gonna, like, you're not gonna go talk to them. That would prevent you from sneaking around, etc. And I should say also that the game rules do mention that you could, during the course of the game, you could be given more time. So it might be that we start out with only 10 places we can go to, but that we get given a couple more chances, a couple more actions as we go. I mean, yes, Jonathan's right. We're going to have to, obviously, we're going to investigate Albert's room at some point. So let's investigate with a V. Let's sneak around Albert's room. All right, so he's in 1941. So now I'm going to flip open to this tab and find 1941. So there's 1941. Let's see what we got. Albert's room. Let's circle this. Let's write it down here. 1941 with a V. This is Albert. Okay, Albert's room leaves you relatively perplexed at first. The corners of the room are illogical, as if they were partitions. But after knocking on all the walls, nothing sounds particularly hollow. You find a large number of books borrowed from the Arkham Library. Most of them are about astronomy, ancestral rites, and esotericism. But the strangest thing you notice is the traces of dirt on the walls, and these scratching noises coming from the walls. They're like portals. I'm going to underline this Arkham Library here. Okay, so in Albert's room, we've got note of Arkham Library. We want to get some background about what he's studying, I guess. Well, that is very creepy, Albert. So what is he's doing some investigation, and he's walled off. Corners of his room have like walls blocking them, but they're not hollow, and we can hear things scratching on the inside. That's a little scary. Well, we've done four out of 10 of our clues. Assuming we have to, what have we been tasked with? We've been tasked with looking into it. You've got until tonight to find the guy. All right, so we're trying to find Albert. Let's just remember that. We're not trying to save the world at this point. We're just trying to find Albert. Is Albert down in the basement, in the pantry? Is this a nice old woman like she appears? Or is there something more nefarious? Does she say any of these people... Sorry, I'm rereading 19. If she says any of these people work with Albert. His work is the only thing that matters. She hasn't seen him at all lately. If you want to talk to him, you should go and knock on his door. But we got into the room, so we don't need to talk to him. She gave us the keys. She has memory problems. What if he's at the morgue the whole time? Jonathan really wants to go to the morgue, huh? What if he's at the morgue the whole time? Yes, he could be. But if he is at the morgue, like, then the case's over. We solved it. He's dead. He's at the morgue. We can. Have you ever seen First 48? They would write when they caught a homicide case. they would write the person's name in one color. That would be that case. And when they solved it, they would erase it and write it in another color or something. So Albert's currently missing. I think we should go to the library. And I mean, I want to go to the library just to go to the library and see what he was studying. Otherwise, we're just knocking on these doors. I mean, we could get a better idea what's going on in this boarding house, but we don't really have much motivation for that. Third floor, Daryl and Emily might know something about, you know, have you heard anything upstairs? Any monsters? All right, I want to go to the library, and that seems like I want to understand what's happening more. It's not it's not super compelling, but visiting the other people in the boarding house, I'm sure we'll have to do. But I don't have much justification for it, so I say we go to the Arkham Library. So 1340, we're gonna go now. This is an interesting, a little bit of a dilemma with the system. The system says interview or investigate. If you go to the library, are we going there to talk to someone? I assume we start out. We don't sneak around till we have a reason to sneak around. So I assume that it's going to be the interview mode, that we go to the library and we ask someone about, like we talk to someone about, hey, can you pull up the records of Albert? Tell us what he's been reading. But let's see what happens. Let's try to look it up 1340 in that mode. So here it is. Here's 1340. We already did 1400, so I should circle that. Okay, so we went to 1400. Wait. 1340, sorry. 1340, we're going to in investigate mode. Not investigate mode, interview mode. Okay, front door mode. Here we go. You are received by Amy Boisnard, the head of the library, an old maid with a very strict dress. Albert Copper. Yes, absolutely. I see very well who he is. He is a model student from a modest family. In recent months, he seemed quite tired, with dark circles under his eyes, and hands shaking slightly. In September, he was mostly borrowing books on mathematics and physics, as well as some science magazines. His requests have turned to more original works lately. Astronomy, then ancestral rites, and finally, esotericism. A month or so ago, he made a very insistent request for books kept in a secure part of the library. Unfortunately, Professor Armitage, who runs that department, is currently in Dunwich and could not follow up on that request. That was 3 weeks ago, and I haven't seen Albert since. Jonathan suggests we call it question mode. I think that makes sense. We're going to question people. Okay, well, unfortunately, we didn't get much information here. Only that 3 weeks ago, he started asking about astronomy and esotericism, or a month ago, and he wanted the secret books in the secret part of the library, and that was 3 weeks ago. Now, what about, does that suggesting that we should be sneaking around the library to get at those books? What do you think? Like, is that the little clue that they're in the secure area and we could sneak around for them? I don't know if that's going to tell us where Albert went, though, because he didn't get access to those books. Presumably, unless he snuck in. Jonathan says, should we sneak into the archives? I don't know. What do you think? Should this be our first sneak into the archives? Shall we try it? Sounds like Jonathan wants to try sneaking into the archives. We could ask Gregory Pravat if he's here, but we shouldn't. We don't want to clue. Let's try to sneak in. Okay, so we're going to try to look up 1340 in sneak mode. Let's see what we got. So we turn to sneak mode. 1340. Here it is. 1340. I guess this should be over here somewhere. 1340, here we go. Armed with a search warrant, you get your hands on all the books Albert had borrowed and returned to the library. After spending a good hour reading, you realize that he made sure to annotate specific works, angle calculations, theories on the effect of stars on specific places in Arkham. Nothing more than esoteric delusions which provide no clue to his whereabouts. Okay, so that was a... I'm adding a new entry for 1340 in sneak mode. That didn't give us quite what we wanted. But a little bit of a clue. It sounded like his calculations were going to pinpoint a location in Arkham where he might go. Maybe to open the portal to some creatures. One of the key themes in the H.P. Lovecraft stories are the people of man not being able to comprehend the infinity and horror of the greater picture and of these extraterrestrial horrific creatures and going mad. So it was suggesting that he was sort of going mad looking at those figures, but maybe he found a place where creatures were coming through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of 10 leads we've looked at so far. When we snuck into the library, we snuck into his house. We could try to sneak into the basement of the house we're in. We could go to the morgue. But wait a minute. The house, Charlene's boarding house, it said a chopper placed next to two beautiful chickens draws your eyes to the table. Further away, you notice a large combination lock affixed to a door. So one thing we don't understand enough about the game system is when you go and investigate, you don't know, like if we tried to investigate, I think it's going to be going to that pantry, but will we chop it open? I mean, we don't know the combination, or will it tell us you don't know the combination? Jonathan says, who did the detective mention was investigated at the boarding house? Okay, let's see. We went to the police station, which was 1400. Gerald was caught pissing on a patrol car. They let him off. Emily was a rebel into politics. And then there's a PI who is investigating the place, but they don't tell us any about that. Is that what you were asking, Jonathan? Yeah, so those are the two people they mentioned. He's drunk, half-empty bottle of whiskey. We let him off. When he's sober, he's a nice guy. And then Emily. So Gerald and Emily we heard about. The other people at the boarding house we have never heard about are Rose, who's on vacation, who's on vacation with her parents as far as I know. And then Emily and Daryl. Emily is the devil, who's a real devil, always wanting to give me a hand. She's a beautiful person. I mean, we might want to just talk to Emily. and then Daryl, who's not much of a talker. No real reason to talk to any of those people. Maybe it's just time to go to the morgue. I mean, I'm not sure we have any other more compelling stuff, except to go into the basement of her house. I am curious to check in the basement, but it's probably just food stores down there. Are we gonna break into some lady's basement just because we see a lock? That doesn't seem very police-like. I think maybe we do have to go to the morgue at this point. Otherwise, how would we know which of these people to talk to? Let's use the information we got from that library. With Albert is trying to find some location in Arkham, calculate the location he should go to some portal. So we've already been to the house. Maybe we should go to other places. All right, so Jonathan's agreeing with me. We're going to go to the morgue. Here we go. So the morgue is 1200. We're going to knock on the door, right? We're going to go into question mode and see what they have to say. So that's 1200. 1200. Okay, I circled this when I shouldn't have, but okay, it's circled now. 1200. So now you've been to every place on this page. You realize that your mission will be a bit more complicated than anticipated when the morgue supervisor responds to your question in the negative. Nope, I haven't received a corpse matching your description in months. Besides, I must admit that lately it's been very calm. The only body I received last night was this worker that was crushed by a girder. Look at his thick, dirty black nails. Never seen anything like that before. The city never ceases to amaze me. Okay. A worker crushed by a girder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 of our 10. Dirty black nails. It's interesting, there's no map, so we can't just come up with our own places to go. And we've now been to all of these places, at least in investigate mode. Question mode. So we went to Miskatonic in question mode. What did we hear at Miskatonic? Let's just see here. Professor Bradshaw. We go into his office. He's one of the most diligent, brilliant students. No warning signs. He had been tired because of personal work. Strict but fair. No reason to suspect him and want to search around. But again, it's Miskatonic University. So if we do a search around, is it his office we're searching around or just the university as a whole? But it sounds like Albert was working mainly in his home and library. So, and I don't see any reason to search around the morgue. So I think it's going to be his fellow boarding students. Rose is on vacation with her parents, as far as I know. Unless she's off with Albert. If we want to search through her room and see if that's a lie. Any reason to pick one room? I mean, here's Albert's room on the 4th floor, right? Here it looks like a partition. Is this one of his partitions? That's above Emily's room. So we could knock on Emily, who's a real devil, but always willing to give a hand. A beautiful person. I mean, I wouldn't mind talking to Emily just to see how beautiful she is. Look, we got a little picture of that house as well. Maybe we should be studying this picture. Does this picture tell us anything? Not really. Not that I can see. So Albert's room is above Daryl's room, but then this whole area on the third floor looks like it's partitioned off somehow in the corners. Maybe we should sneak around all these rooms. Jonathan says, do we need to investigate more of the morgue? I don't know. Unless we have some evidence that the guy who's running the morgue is trying to hide information from us. John says, are we sure the body is not Albert since there was dirt marks on the wall and his corpse has dirty nails? Yeah, but he says, here's a worker crushed by a girder last night. Look at his thick, dirty black nails. He was crushed by a girder. I mean, we described the body. I haven't received a corpse matching your description in months. So we've told him what Albert looks like, and he's like, nope, not Albert. So like, if we think he's lying, then we should investigate around the morgue. But unless we have evidence why he would be lying, he's told us about a worker that doesn't match Albert's description. I think I have no reason to really doubt him. I think we should sneak around that house, but boy, with only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with only 3 clues left, I don't know where to. I mean, if we're supposed to find him, you have a point that I think he's down in that basement of the house, is what I think. I think he's down in the basement of the house. I think we should sneak around that little old lady. That's what I think. I just don't know if we're ready to sneak around down there. But I do suspect he's down in the house. Did she say anything that we found suspicious? You have to knock several times before a small woman opens the door. And she brings us in. She gives us keys. I think we should search the house. Yeah, I want to investigate the basement. That's exactly what I want to do. All right. So we're going to go to 1900. Skulk around. Here we go. Let's see what we got. Miss Charlene's boarding house is a 3-story building whose windows, like eyes, give it an inquisitive look. It is located, this is the same description. It is located in a quiet area of Arkham, some 300 yards from the university, an ideal boarding house for students looking for a roof, cooked food, and some peace and quiet for a modest sum of money. You decide to ferret about the ground floor in the absence of its owner. The living room is plain, only adorned with a carpet in red tones, and on the mantel a photograph of a young couple, a soldier and a nurse. Miss Charlene's room is most ordinary, so we're getting almost identical to when we visited her, but we are skulking around. So this is why you might go to one and not the other. The garden is tiny and well maintained. The kitchen is full of food and utensils. A chopper placed next to 2 beautiful chickens draws your eyes to the table. Further away, you notice a large combination lock affixed to a door that probably leads to a pantry. Everything is perfectly maintained and cleaned with care, except perhaps the undersides of the kitchen furniture, which conceals traces of dirt. So we got a little bit of a clue about underside of kitchen furniture, traces of dirt. But boy, that was mostly not useful information and didn't let us go into the basement like I wanted to. There's a bunch of mention of dirt, though. There's a mention of dirt at the morgue guy. There's dirt on the underside of the kitchen furniture. When we talk to her, she describes how I clean up after them when they leave dirt on the kitchen floor. And then up in his room, in his room, we found dirt. Right, let's look at his room again. We knock on the walls. Nothing sounds hollow. Traces of dirt on the floor. Well, now Jonathan is... Now the dirt under his nails is making me think morgue. That's interesting now. Like maybe we could investigate that body and find out where that worker was working. It's hard to know what the investigate will yield. Interesting. Jonathan says, I'm leaning towards follow-up at the morgue. Yeah, now I am too, because of the dirt connection. We've only got 8. We've done 8 of 10, so we're almost running out of things. Yeah, I mean, I have a thought on this mechanic already. I'm undecided, but it kind of feels like it might have been a little easier to wrap our head around if you always go on question mode, and then there was a little note like, do you want to investigate the body or whatever. It's a little, we're getting our footing in terms of understanding what this investigate skulk around mode is, so it's a little bit weird. John says a little bit of meta element. Seems like you go there at first, seems unrelated, then you find more relations to dirt to go back. Yeah, I think that I like this idea. I like the idea that now we've clicked about dirt, and so now we've got something that seems unrelated, so let's investigate. I like it. I like your thinking. Let's do it. Let's 1200 sneak around. It's just a little weird because you think what we might want to do is just talk to that guy more and ask him about dirt, talk to the morgue attendant. So it's a little strange that now we have to... I wonder if a different way to do it might be like you could imagine a different mechanic where instead of choosing between interview and investigate, it's that you always look up the number. There's always one place you look up a number, and then what you could choose to do is follow up. So you always go and read the number, and then for any number, you could waste a little bit of time and try to follow up. And that would be like go to the supplementary clue for that location. And some places, if you were smart, would have follow-up information. It's an interesting idea. Not the system here. Okay, so we're going to sneak around the morgue. 1200, if there is a 1200. Let's see. I don't believe there is a 1200. Okay, so it looks like you can't sneak around the morgue to me. Let's make sure we understand that correctly. Investigations start at 1300. Okay, there's no sneaking around the morgue. Okay, well that solves that problem. Okay, well we went to the morgue and we finished the morgue. And we finished Charlene's boarding house because we snuck around and saw more dirt. And I'll just note that no 1200V. Okay, that doesn't count as one of our 10 leads, so we've still got 2 more. Seems like it should be one of the kids at the boarding house. But just to refresh, here's your options. We could sneak around Miskatonic. We could sneak around the police station. We've already talked and snuck in the library. And we've already snuck into Albert's room. So 2 more. We could knock on Emily's door, knock on Gerald's door, knock on Daryl's door, or we could sneak around their rooms. Jonathan says, I'm leaning towards the political lady. Maybe she would have ties to the worker, if the worker is not just a red herring. Is Emily the beautiful one? Emily, who's a real devil, but always willing to give me a hand. Yeah, okay, let's go talk to Emily, the suffragette for voting rights. Let's knock on her door. Right? We're not gonna sneak around. First we might as well talk to them. We have no reason to believe there's anything fishy about her. So we're gonna talk on her door in 1931. All right, here we go. Emily opens the door. Knock, knock, knock. Emily opens the door. At first, she has a closed face and a defensive attitude. However, when you ask her about Albert, she finally proves talkative. Albert is a bit of a strange boy. I saw him wandering around with a pickaxe covered in dirt. In the corridor, late at night. I think he's a sleepwalker. And I must say, it's been weeks since I saw him. He may have gone on a trip. I always found him a little scary, so I never talked to him much. That's it. All right. So he's walking around with a pickaxe. He's definitely digging in some dirt. Where would that be? It's down in the pantry, surely. But I don't know how to get down there. I don't know, not surely, but we have no other location to go to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've only got one more lead to follow, technically. Now, Emily, where's the person? Let's think about this for a second. Ground floor. Charlene's room. Pantry goes down to the basement. Emily's room is where we just went. She's the one who's right below this partition. Rose is on vacation as far as she knows. So we could sneak around Rose's room. Gerald's just a hooligan who was pissing on patrol cars. Daryl is not much of a talker, that one. So Daryl's room would be a natural one to search too. But we've only got one more to do. Daryl is right below Albert. So, and Daryl's not much of a talker. So maybe either Daryl's room or the girl's on vacation. I don't know. What do you think? Of those two, if we can only do one of them. We're going to search a room. It's either going to be Daryl's room, who's not much of a talker, who's right below Albert, or it can be Rose's room because Rose is on vacation unless she's dead and the landlady's lying to us about her being on vacation. What do we know? Daryl, we know he's not much of a talker. Always in his books. So Daryl is another researcher always in his books. And the one on vacation is very nice, but you won't be able to talk to her. She's on vacation with her parents, as far as I know. She did say the landlady had a bad memory. It's true. Yeah, what does she say about her memory? Is that a clue for us? I wrote the name of each student on the keys. It's better that way. I've had memory problems for some years now. Husband died in 1918. I'm just going to underline that 1918. It's possible, like, if the game asks us for like a combination to the lock, we might try 1918. Jonathan says, let's search Rose's room for a long shot. Okay, let's try Rose's room. And then if we want to cheat, we could search Daryl's room. Or if we fail, we go back to it and search Daryl's room. All right, so we're going to search Rose's room, the woman who's on vacation with her parents, as far as I know. All right, we're going to do it. We're going to search Rose's room, 1922. 1922 search mode. 1922. Rose's room is neatly kept. Nothing seems unusual. However, after a short search, you find many letters she received from her parents, which give a glimpse of quiet, everyday life in the small town of Ipswich. 2000. You also learn that Rose must be there at this very moment. The crumpled piece of paper you take from the waste paper basket turns out to be the breakup letter Albert wrote her last week. Finally, Rose's jewelry box is complete, except for a case that could hold, for example, a large pendant. Okay, that's it. So, we finally discovered a clue. Rose and Albert were dating. Albert wrote her last week. Remember, he's been missing for 3 weeks. Last week, he was alive writing a breakup letter. And they're in Ipswich. So we discovered a new place, which sounds like where we want to go, but we can't because we've run out of time. All right. So, Jonathan says, let's guess Ipswich as a location. Let's see we don't know how it's going to, yes, it's going to be interesting to see what our choices are at the end. But let's just see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so we've done 10. You can do 10 leads before turning to intervention. All right, so here we go. We're going to turn to intervention. Let's see what we're told. We have, because this is new to us. We don't know how this is going to be framed. Is this just going to tell us pick a location to go to, or is it going to say, okay, here's intervention. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so I see from looking at it that intervention is just a list of things. So okay, so when you've exhausted the allowed number of leads, choose one and only one location and read the corresponding entry in the intervention section. So I guess, as Jonathan was saying, let's just guess Ipswich as the solution. Nothing actual paranormal happening. Never mind, he broke up with her. Well, the fact that he broke up with her a week ago and he's been missing for 3 weeks does suggest... Well, now Jonathan's changing his mind. But if he broke up with her a week ago, and he hasn't been seen for 3 weeks... Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay, so let's think about it. He wrote a letter to her. He's been missing for 3 weeks, and then a week ago, breakup letter, and she goes home with a pendant. So there's 2 ways to read that. We could read that he's in Ipswich, where she went with her parents, but he broke up with her, so why would he be there with her? The other possibility is that it's a fake breakup that the landlady has written. And he's down in the pantry. But, yeah. How long does she say Rose has been gone? She's on vacation with her parents, as far as I know. That's all she says. She doesn't say how long she's been gone. Okay. But I thought this is a little interesting. I thought that when we read the intervention section, it was going to say, like, do you want to go to place number 56, 57, 58? Like, give us the locations that aren't yet in our list here. But it doesn't. It's saying just pick a place from our existing places. So what we can choose is we can choose the boarding house as our answer. We can't choose basement, but we can choose boarding house. So I'll tell you why I think we should choose boarding house also. Jonathan says, let's guess basement. I agree, because Ipswich we could have gone to. Like, we didn't have time to, but we could have gone to. So if he was there, we would have found him. The only place we tried to go to, and we didn't get in, was that boarding house and basement. But Jonathan, if you think he's the worker, then we could go to the morgue and maybe he just looks different. But I don't think so. I agree with you, Jonathan. I think basement is our best get. So remember, we can't guess basement, but we can guess the boarding house. So the boarding house is 1900. So we're going to guess 1900. But we're going to try to read the only 1900 solution if it's there. If it's not there, we would get 0 points. And if it's wrong, then we'll try again. All right, so we're going to guess 1900. So we go to the last page, which is upside down. We turn it upside down, and we quickly block off everything that's not our number, and we read. Here we go. A quick overview of the boarding house allows you to focus on one essential point, the pantry. If it's just food in the pantry, it'll be fun. After breaking open the lock with the crowbar, you notice a flight of stairs leading to the basement. As you are about to descend the stairs, 2 men in black frock coats stop you, flashing badges for a federal bureau you didn't even know existed, the Bureau of Investigation. Okay, Jonathan was right. We are just regular cops, and now we've run into the Bureau of Investigation, which is what the main game is. At the sight of their gear, a flashlight attached to a 12-gauge shotgun, trench daggers, heavy caliber handguns, and harnesses strung over their suits, you take a step back. These guys are professionals. They undertake to descend into the bowels of the earth. After an hour and a series of detonations, the 2 men finally come back upstairs, dirty and injured. There's nothing more we can do for these kids. You did everything you could, but it was already too late. The taller of the two places a caring hand on your shoulder and continues. You did an outstanding job today. We always need resourceful and courageous guys like you at the Bureau. If you're interested, come and see us tomorrow morning. They leave as quickly as they came. No one would know they had been there if it weren't for the traces of dirt on the floor, the smell of rotting carcass emanating from the basement, and this business card from the Bureau of Investigation. You have completed your mission and can now discover even more exciting and strange adventures in the Bureau of Investigation's game. Okay, so we pieced it together. We discovered the mystery down in the basement. I'm guessing that the other places we could have looked in and the answer wouldn't have that answer, but we can now go look. If this was the real game, we would be given a score now. We would pick 3 places to go to wrap up loose ends and add up our scores. Here with the demo case, it's just 1 and we're done and no score. But I think let's look now at see if there's an Ipswich. If we had guessed Ipswich, what we would have said, what we would have seen, and then maybe we'll talk about it. All right, so if we had guessed Ipswich, well, okay, let me stop here for a second and talk about this. We've got a choice. We could now go investigate those other places as if we were still playing the game, like replay it and see what they said, or look at the answers for these other places if we had guessed them for the end thing. I'm kind of curious, since I think we finished it and succeeded, let's just look at what would have happened if we had guessed the other places. If you think you want to play this yourself and guess a different place, or go investigate other places so that you have a different experience than we did here, you could stop now. Otherwise, Jonathan, are you okay with me reading? I'll read the answer if we had guessed Ipswich, and I'll read the answer if we had guessed the morgue as our final location to search. All right, Jonathan, I'm going to ask if you're okay with that. Or we could go and investigate those places as if we had unlimited time. Jonathan says he's okay. Okay, so again, turn away if you want to try something differently. I'm going to see what would have happened if we had guessed the morgue, which was 1200. Okay, so if we had guessed the morgue, 1200, there's no entry. So that would be a loss. That would just be a pure lose. If we had guessed the Ipswich, that would be 2000. Looks like there's no entry for 2000 either. So if we had guessed Ipswich, no answer. So it's a good thing we didn't guess Ipswich. So, but there are answers for some places that, let's see, what about his room, 1941? Okay, 1941 does have an entry. So if we had guessed that he was still trapped in his room, let's see what we would have said. This is interesting. Okay, armed with your tools, which actually it wouldn't have been a bad guess. We didn't even consider that. But those partitions in the wall filled with dirt, I think if we had thought about that, we might have guessed that he was in the walls of his room. It just didn't even occur to us. But let's see if we'd guessed that. Armed with your tools, shovels, pickaxes, and elbow grease, you are determined to find what this curious room is hiding. But after several hours of digging behind every wall and smashing the few pieces of furniture there, you have to face the facts. Albert's not here. You have failed, and what's more, the almost imperceptible scratching noises are still all around you. Creepy. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is interesting. Remember I said when we were reading about her house, I underlined here 1918. That was the date the husband died. She's got a photo of him. So I said, like, if it ever asks us combination, let's try 1918. But it looks like this game is a little sneaky because I see there was no location in 1918, But I see you could have guessed 1918 as your answer. Let's see what would happen if you had read that. You glance over at your colleagues from the police station who have come to lend you a hand. Their determined looks restore your confidence, and you launch the intervention. Everyone knows their part, and you quickly secure the first floor. You rush to the kitchen and fiddle with the combination lock that bars the door leading to the pantry, 1918. You were right. Instead of a pantry, a flight of damp stairs awaits you. Encouraged by the presence of your brothers in arms, you make your way down. Quickly, the stone floor gives way to a chaos of rocks and loose earth. As you progress through a muddy trench with some difficulty, you are stopped by injunctions further up the assault column. Stop! Come back! Climbing the stairs last, you discover your colleagues in a semicircle, facing two guys in black frock coats, flashing badges for a federal bureau you didn't know existed. The Bureau of Investigation. These men look impressive. Flashlights attached to it. It's the same thing we read before. We are taking command. There's nothing more we can do for these kids. You did an outstanding day. So it's the same basic answer, but two different ways to get down to the basement, which might shed a little bit of light on why in the full game you pick 3 locations. So it's clever. It's sort of an analog way of how an app or the websites might do this for some of the suspect games, where you could like pick 3 different ways of framing your answer, and the game knows there are 3 possible correct answers. But this is a little sneaky because 1918 wasn't a location, but it was something we could have used as our answer. We might keep that in mind when we play the real game, that if we come up with a number, even though it's not a location, that might be a thing. So here's the last option that it's got in the interventions. If we had picked Gerald's room. Searching through Gerald's room, you find a rather large stock of contraband alcohol carefully hidden under the floorboards. There are too many of them to be for his personal consumption. Gerald just earned a one-way ticket to jail, but no trace of Albert or anyone else. So presumably if he had gone in his room, he would have been hiding something under the floorboards maybe. And if you guessed this, you might guess that he's hidden under the floorboards of Gerald's house. All right. I wonder if that's okay. So comparing, if Gregory's in the channel now, I have a couple of questions. But assuming he's not, if Gregory, if you are, you could pipe up. If not, let's talk a little bit about in the full game. There's an intervention step where you guess 3 locations and look up and get your score and see if you're right. And then there's the story explanation and the story of how you could have solved it. So this demo case doesn't have that. Again, that's another way in which the demo case is quite different than the full cases. And then, so this is, if we had picked Ipswich and it wasn't here, I have to say okay, you know what? Let me not discuss it yet. Let's take our little 8-minute break. Everyone stretch, go to the bathroom, get your tea. We'll come back, take that time to gather your thoughts. We'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about it. So I'll see you in 8 minutes. Okay, we're back. You're watching Co-op for Two. We've just played the demo print and play case for Bureau of Investigation, investigations into Arkham and Elsewhere. Now we're going to review it, but talk about the changes, the system, some from a design perspective. We'll just talk a little bit about the game and our impressions. And a little philosophical discussion of the genre and the game. Before we start, however, this will be spoilers. We'll talk about this case. So if for some reason you still want to play this case, it's going to be hard to listen to this. But Jonathan is asking, real quick, is there an entry in the non-intervention section for 1918? That's a very good question. So 1918 was the sneaky answer. Let's see. Let's just look through this and see what else we can see. That's a good question. So there's no 1918 entry for talking, but let's see if there's a 1918 entry for sneaking around. There is. So if we had tried to use that 1918 to sneak around and get into the pantry, which I think would have been a great thing to do, because maybe we could have... when you guess at the end, you're wasting one of your guesses, or in the demo, your only guess. But if you look up a lead and it's not there, it's free. So that does encourage you to go to places during the investigation that probably don't exist. So if we had gone there, let's see what it would say. Now that the landlady has gone to buy some food at the nearby market, you discreetly enter her kitchen and fiddle with the combination lock that bars the door leading to the pantry. The combination you deduced is correct and opens the way, not to the pantry, but a flight of damp steps. Armed with only flashlights, you begin to descend, listening only to your courage. The stone floor quickly gives way to a chaos of rocks and loose earth. The damp, narrow passageway sinks deeper and deeper. Finally, after roughly 100 feet, a mass of bloody rags mixed with bones and shreds of flesh gives you a glimpse of the sad truth. Rose didn't just disappear. She was served as food to some hungry animal. You hurry to follow a filthy trail of blood and pieces of flesh, like some sort of disgusting treasure hunt. As the passageway splits into several galleries, you begin to hear screams, grunts, and footsteps, and they are all converging on the same point, you. The flashlights slip out of your hands as the tide of fangs and claws sweeps you away. And there, in the beam of a flashlight, you see a body curled up onto the ground. You have perfectly completed your mission by finding the bodies of the two students without any external help. Ironically, it would seem that your sagacity and curiosity will not be rewarded today. You're dead. Well, that's fascinating. That's worth discussing. So this 1918 entry, which we noticed while playing and thought of as using that number here, but we thought we would use it only if we were asked, like, do you know the combination, whatever. So it's a little bit of, this is like learning the ground rules of the game, and the game might, it might have been nice if the game told you, like, you know, you might be looking up entries from a number that's not specifically given to you as a place. But that's a very weird, that would be a very weird thing if the moment imagine you go to the boarding house as your first clue. You notice she says the husband's died in 1918. Your second clue is you look up 1918. You find it and you're dead. That would have been that would be a very weird experience to have, to die on your second clue, but also have solved it on your second clue. I'm not sure what you would do at that point. If we read this, we wouldn't really know. It doesn't say the adventure's over. You've won the way the endings do. So that's weird. That's a little weird. It's fun. It was a cool scene that got described to us. It's not exactly clear why doing this down to the basement now during your investigation kills you, but waiting an hour later and trying it doesn't. It's a little confusing. It's a little weird, but it's pretty cool. Let's see if we had gone to Ipswich. After spending an hour in your car and not far from the house of Rose's parents, you see a suspicious-looking individual knocking on their door. He speaks with Rose's father for a few minutes before continuing on his way. A quick tailing reveals his headquarters, a covered truck that he has converted into a mobile office. And then if we followed him on the next clue, it would just be another dead end where he's interacting with the people from Bureau of Investigation. Okay, that was good that Jonathan thought to check that. That's an interesting mechanic, that number was not explicitly in the game. I like that we could look it up. It was clearly a central element to the story, but if you'd done that earlier, you would have died. I'm not sure that you die, but you win. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm okay with it in general. It's just a little weird that if you go to that number early, like if you're smart enough to go to that number early, it feels like you're kind of getting punished compared to if you go to it at the end. But if you buy into the game, if you knew that going in, like that's an interesting, we've learned a couple meta things about the philosophy of the author Gregory Pravat. Like you might now think like, maybe I should wait to go to a place until the end of the game. Should you be thinking like at the end of the game, you go with your full squad? And so you should be thinking about, do you want to be going alone someplace or do you want to call in the squad? Is that how you should think about the end question? Like when you decide to solve the case in the intervention, you're going with the full force of the squad, of the Bureau. Whereas if you go while you're going alone, you're at more risk. That would be a very interesting little twist to thinking about things. But I think it would be hard to avoid going to a place that's interesting. And I know now that we saw our suspicions about the 1918 were correct, if you were playing the game, especially since leads are free, if they're not there, anytime you ran into a number that looked like it could be something, you'd look it up just to make sure. And I'm presuming you can't go to 1918 as an interview question. Yeah. Okay, well, let's give some thoughts. Although Jonathan says, piece of advice, I think that maybe the intervention 1918 should reiterate the code came from the picture. That way it's clear if a player missed that but just read the endings. Yes, although don't forget, in the real cases, there is a story explanation that is missing from this demo case. So that might be a place for the story to say how the code was figured out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about general impressions, thoughts. I mean, I had fun playing the demo case. I think, again, this is not a full review. Having not played the game, I can't speak to the game in general. And, you know, you should know I'm coming at this as a fan of the genre. But I'm going to put you off screen for a bit, Jonathan, while you collect your thoughts. But I absolutely am looking forward to playing the main game. Even if this was a horrible experience, I like this genre and this idea so much that I would want to play the full game. But just looking at the way this worked and the spirit of the writing, very compelling, very engaging. The idea of playing a long game in this world of horror and suspense and creepiness is very appealing, and I can't wait to buy and play through the full game. So for me, this is definitely a buy and play, and I think everything we've seen is positive. it's compelling. So I'm looking forward to playing the real thing. Now, I do want us to spend some time talking about the new mechanics, how they worked, and from a game design perspective, sort of pontificate on how they might be improved. Again, speaking from just the demo version, but some thoughts on the changes. But overall experience, I mean, I love the setting. It's the idea that you're walking around in this world of dread and fear and paranoia and madness is a very different feel than Sherlock Holmes. And it's fun, different, and interesting. And, you know, Mythos Tales captures that as well. It makes me want to play Mythos Tales again, too. But that's exciting. The idea of playing in a world. Jonathan, you in particular, have been talking when we play these, we've been playing these crime dossiers lately. You have really liked those rare elements of sort of paranoia and danger and fear. And this looks like a world where you're really going to get that. And that's fun. It feels like this is a game where if you, it's like watching the horror, listening to the horror radio plays. If you can walk into these with your imagination running at full speed, the pleasure of the H.P. Lovecraft stories is captured here. This feeling of paranoia, dread, madness right around the corner. So you have to bring that, right? You have to bring. It seems like to me that this game is going to lean much more heavily on bringing your imagination to a world of fear and paranoia and madness and scariness, rather than leaning so much on your deductive abilities of piecing together all the clues to solve the mystery. And if you can go into this game with that, encouraging in yourself that sense of fear and paranoia, it feels like we could have a really fun time with this. And I really look forward to some scarier, deeper cases. Overall, very positive feel for this, looking forward to the game. Before we talk about details and mechanics, Jonathan, what was your any overall thoughts about the experience as a whole in terms of looking ahead to the full game? I really do appreciate the fact that, like, just reading that last thing where the guy died, like that's actually nice to see, because it ramps up the danger. It makes it feel like you're walking around in danger. Overall thoughts, Jonathan? Jonathan says, made me curious how this system would work in the full game, but told a good story. Yeah, the rules actually say that, you know, this is a world of where man cannot, in the world of H.P. Lovecraft, not everything you're going to be able to understand and comprehend. So I do feel like you might have to go into it with a little more tolerance for things being unsolved, unresolved, compared to Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes, you want to get to the end and find everything explained, the whole story, all the pieces. Whereas here, you're trying to find the right solution, the right intervention, but maybe man should not be expected to completely understand what's going on in this world. Duke of Zill has joined in and said, how was it? It was good. It was interesting. It was, it makes me look forward to the full game. I think Very much looking forward to the full game. So all positive. Now, let's talk about the differences, the mechanical stuff. There were parts of this I really like, parts of it that I'm unsure about. But let's compare this to Sherlock Holmes, and I'm going to turn this off while I talk. It did use a new mechanics. I'm going to talk about that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the sort of emphasis of the story and the suspense and the imagination. And I think that if you're interested in H.P. Lovecraft world and paranoia, tension, scariness, feel of danger that you don't get from Sherlock Holmes, I feel like it's captured well, and I really look forward to longer cases where we've got a sense of dread that's continuing. Let's talk about one of the mechanics, one of the changes that I have some concerns about, and how that's handled and in a way that reassures me a little bit. One of my biggest concerns was the idea of having a time limit. When we play Sherlock Holmes, consulting detective, I want to read every clue before we try to put together an answer and try to figure out the mystery. I'm there for the story, so I want to read all of the story elements, but then I want to be able to solve the mystery having read everything. Not everyone agrees with that. Some people want to play it more of a challenging game, so they want to try to solve it in a certain number of leads. Bureau of Investigation has chosen the latter way, where you've got a very strict number of leads, and this felt very tight, like 10 leads. I really felt like it was pushing us to solve it way before we would be comfortable guessing. There were places where it could have been that we didn't know. And if we had gotten that wrong, maybe it would have left a little bit of a worse taste in our mouth, having to guess an answer. But I think the solution that Gregory has come up with is quite clever and really solves that problem for me, which is that when you get to the end, you pick locations, as your guess for the solution, you're not asked to answer a question and then told the answer. You pick where to go to neutralize the threat, which might map to how well you understand it. But the idea that if you're wrong, you could just play again and go to new leads, go to new places. That means that it's really not a hard limit on how much time you have. It's much more a flavor of forcing you to guess on a tight schedule, but then letting you keep going if you get it wrong. And to me, that means it's okay. That makes it not unpleasant that we didn't get more time, because you do get more time. It's just encouraging you to try to answer it efficiently. And we'll see if the full cases keep with this promise that if you get it wrong, you haven't spoiled it and you can go back and read more. It's interesting to see how that's handled in different games. In some of the mystery suspect games, which use a website, it asks you a question, you guess. If you're wrong, you go back and you try again. So that uses a website to hide the real answers from you. And another game that tries to do this is Suspects, a card-based game. They have an interesting little twist where you see a certain amount of clues and then you're asked to guess the answer. And then you see more clues and asked to guess again, and then all of the clues and you're asked to guess again. And you get a score depending on how long it took you. So here that's a little different. It does tell you to basically go back and try again. It might make a little I think Gregory was saying that he didn't fully anticipate that people would be replaying these cases if they get it wrong. And maybe you might imagine that there would be something in the rules that gave you a score if you had to try it again, and maybe had more instructions about, like, okay, if you get it wrong, here, like instructions of what to do, or maybe a game description. One thing that was a little weird for me was, and I don't know if this is just because of the demo case or maybe all the cases are worked this way, you're told at the beginning, after 10 leads, in the real game, I guess it would be 15, go to the intervention section and guess. And I expected the intervention section to have like a little paragraph summing up, like, you've called back into the office and the guy says, where should we send the squad? And you pick the location. I think that would have been helpful. A little setup, a little interlude story that sets up your guess, and maybe it would help frame how you should be thinking about your answer. Like maybe he calls you into the office and says, where should we send the squad to find the body? And maybe something like that will be present in the main game. I don't know. But some little setup before the intervention part would have been nice. And this manner of picking a location actually reminded me a little bit of Chronicles of Crime, because Chronicles of Crime has that little flavor where the end question, the way you answer it is you scan one of the pieces of evidence, or you answer questions by scanning objects in the game that you've discovered. And this has a little bit of that flavor where you're picking as an answer one of the locations or people in the game. Remember, people would correspond to numbers and locations too. I do think it would have been nice if it posed us a little story setup to frame the kind of answer we're giving it. So, but I really like this way of ending the game, and I think it offers more possibilities too. You're not just trying to solve a mystery, you're trying to make a decision, operationalize your knowledge that might lead to more interesting choices. And I'm very curious how this system works where you don't just pick one place, you can pick multiple places. It's not clear to me if that is mainly so that you can pick 3 places and maybe you'll get 2 of them wrong and 1 right, or if the 3 places might be wrapping up like a little side story here, side quest here, and the main answer. If so, that's also interesting because it might add a little meta strategic element here. Like, should we waste all of our 3 guesses trying to get the main puzzle? Or should we waste them, 1 on trying to rescue this person and then waste 1 on the real answer? Very clever idea. I can't wait to see how it's done, and I think it's worth. It's absolutely an idea that other spin-offs of this genre could use. I'll be curious to see if in the real case, Gregory also uses some of this idea that Dave Neal and Mythos Tale used, where you go to one place and it says like circle this letter S so that you know you've found out about this. So when you go to a location, it'll say, if you circled an S, you can read this paragraph. If not, read this. It doesn't look like that mechanic is present here. I'm a fan of that mechanic. So I'm just mentioning that we didn't see it here. I think it's worth talking a little bit about this mechanic of 2 ways to check out a location. We can interview there or investigate there. I'm of mixed feelings about this. So first of all, as a general idea, as a clever new mechanic, I like it. I think it added some interesting decisions on our part, and as a general idea, I like it. It feels like maybe it could have used another round of tweaking on it. And maybe the fact that some people who have played this got confused about it is a little indication of that. And the naming, at least the English naming of interview versus investigate, adds to that confusion. Logically, it makes some sense. You can go to a place sort of at the front door to talk to someone, or you can investigate sort of behind people's back and skulk around. That makes logical sense. But it's a little awkward for each location, us to be considering this and have to flip through to the investigate or skulk around or not. And with these games where it's hard to, where anything could lead to some value, it's hard to not want to do both at every place, which is not really a knock on it. But I think we saw a little bit of the weakness of the approach when we went to a couple places and the exact same text had to be reproduced. Like we went to the boarding house. You knock on the door, you talk to the woman, and it gives you a long description of the house. And if you chose to investigate the house, it says you wait till she's gone, you walk in, and 90% of the description of that paragraph was the same. So there's two issues there. One is, as a programmer, I'll tell you what I think the root. Don Knuth said that the root of all evil in programming is premature optimization, but I believe it's repeating code. There's an acronym, DRY, do not repeat yourself. And the point is, if in two places of your program you're repeating the same code, you've got a problem. Whereas when you fix one, you forget that you should have fixed the other, and you have two places to fix. So anytime you have duplicate code, you want to refactor it so that you're calling a function and that code is always in one place. So as a writer, you've made life harder for yourself. Now you've got two places where the description of the house is. If you change one and localize one, you have to remember to do the other. So if I was talking to Gregory, I might say, well, is it necessary to have these two independent ways you can go to a place? Might it not make sense that you always go to a place once, sort of in the front door, you read the paragraph, and then either the paragraph will say, like you go to the house and you talk to the woman, and then maybe that paragraph would say, if you want to investigate further, read here. Okay, so what would you lose from that? You would lose the idea of hiding the knowledge that there is a second paragraph to read. The way it is now, you don't know. Should I go to this place? Maybe it'll be blank. Should I go to this place? Because if it's blank, it doesn't cost you. The only reason you wouldn't always go to both places was a fear that going to a place is going to have a paragraph but be useless, be redundant. So you could, I guess for me, from what I've experienced so far, I think I might advise and like it a little better to say you go to a place, you read the first clue, you always do that, and then either there'll be a section that says, if you want to sneak around the house, go here. Or maybe you don't even say that, but it's common knowledge that you always go to the first place, and then you can choose always to sneak around. But if you said that people always go to the first place first, it would do two things. First of all, you wouldn't have to worry about repeating yourself, because the digging around, skulking around would always be in addition to the first place. And it would seem like you could balance the scoring of the number of leads better, because you'd know in order to sneak, someone would always first go to the first place. It feels like it would give you a little more control of the pacing and everything. And that's one of the things I focus when I talk about these games, is looking for ways to give the author control of the pace and the progress and difficulty so that they can better tweak it. And I can see Duke of Zil made a fantastic point in the comment here, which is what I'm suggesting is a little bit akin to the dig deeper mechanic in Detective. And that is a very insightful comment, because in Detective, a modern crime board game, which is over there at the very edge, Ignacy Trzewiczek has a little mechanism like that where you read a clue, and some clues say, hey, if you want to dig deeper, you have to decide right now, and it will cost you whatever, a lead or whatever. Then you can dig a little deeper. And my gut is that might be a slightly better solution than what we've got here. So that feels like it might be a little cleaner. And the other thing that it would solve that's weird here is that going to the front door or interview, what it's called, it's a weird term to call that interview because sometimes you're just going to a place you don't know who you're talking to. But that's sort of the approach where you're just like, well, let's just go and see what the person has to say or what's there. The choice to investigate, when we were playing, often we thought we were doing one thing, but when we read the paragraph, the author explained to us that we were doing something else. So, for example, when we were at the boarding house, we discovered this locked pantry, right? And we said, okay, we want to get into that locked pantry. That's probably the investigate action. We read the investigate action, and the investigate action describes that we sneak in the house and look around the house, but don't go in the pantry. So that catch-all investigate term led to cases where we wanted to do one thing, but when we looked up that paragraph, it was describing us doing something else. That was a little odd. Like that happened again with the library. We wanted to, when we did investigate, to look at the locked cabinet of reserve books, but instead it had us looking up the books he checked out. And that would be solved if you go to the library and you read it, and then it said, hey, if you want to dig deeper into what books he got, read here, or if you want to skulk around the reserve section, do this. So I guess I feel like you could have kept with the old system and had more branching choices than this. But maybe in the full game, we will see that there might be times when this is better. Jonathan points out one possible option, which is, Jonathan points out, my guess is danger in the game, maybe sometimes the interview is the dangerous option. That wasn't the case here, but yes, that would be a reason why you might split those up. Although, let me push back on that a little bit. I like that idea. I like that going in the front door and interviewing could have danger. But I will say a branching thing would solve that too. And Gumshoe did stuff like that, right? What it would be you say, go to the library or go to the boarding house, right? So there would just be one number. You'd go to the boarding house. And then when you read that paragraph, it would say, do you want to talk to the person? Branch off to this number. If you want to sneak in, branch off to this number. To me, that seems like the more flexible, better system. And not only that, that would give you a little more power. Then sometimes, as the author, you'd say they always, when they go there, they read the description, they talk to her, and then they have a choice. Sometimes they have to choose right away, and you could even do something like say, hey, you can only do one of these. Having more of a branching rather than these two independent things that could be gone to in every case, in every order, does seem like it forces some duplication and loses a little bit of control. So I think I would have preferred it to be branching, and also makes the person look up twice if they want to look up twice. But I'll reserve full judgment for playing the real game, and then I'll offer whether these are criticisms or not later. But so on one hand, I love the idea that for every place, there might be two ways to gain information about it. I just think I would have preferred a sort of branching tree method where you go to the place and then either you can decide on the two, or you first do the easy one and then you decide whether you want to spend a point and go. And I think that might be a little more satisfying and give the author a little more room to describe what the sneaking method would entail. Then it could say, do you want to sneak around the house? Do you want to choose to go into the basement, etc.? Yeah. Okay, so there's that. I've talked quite a bit already about how much I like the idea that you're not asked to answer questions, but asked to decide where to go to solve it. And I said I think it would be nice to frame that a little better. And I'd like to see, I'm looking forward to seeing in the game whether that's used in additional clever ways, like to solve side quests, or maybe even to present some moral questions for the person. You could imagine a game where at the end you had to decide which person to save. You could either save your friend or this stranger who's going to save the city, and it's not a matter of getting it right or wrong, but choosing what story path you want to unfold. And I don't know if this game does that in the full game, but it's certainly a possibility given this system. Any other thoughts from Jonathan? I do want to talk before we finish about some conversation that I had with Gregory about live streaming the full cases. But let's talk a little bit more first. Jonathan says, I'm curious if in the main game you would return to a previous lead and do an investigate instead of interview after following up some other leads and finding other clues. I'm also curious if you could die while investigating in the full game. What would that be a game over if you only found one of 3 locations? It is an interesting question. If you died in the middle of a case, would you just play it again and not go there? This has a little bit of the gumshoe feel where bad things can happen to you. So we're told in the full game that there are going to be cases where you might buy yourself some more time, which is fun. It adds this gamey element of like, should I do leads that might give us more time? Duke of Zil says, I believe the ending of each case has 3 locations. Maybe if all 3 you choose are pertinent, then you get the most points. You can still succeed without getting all 3 correct. Yes, that's absolutely the case. But Jonathan's point stands. Like, are there going to be ways to die? In this game, you could have died in the middle of the game. You never even got to the point. If you died there, you wouldn't jump to the intervention. That death just said you solved it and you died. Don't even bother with the intervention step. So that was interesting. But let me see if I understand Jonathan's first point here. If the main game, you would return to a previous lead and do an investigate instead of interview after following up some other leads and finding further clues. I guess in the best case, this does share a little bit with Detective Modern Crime board game, which is also very focused on making the game part the efficient use of time and clues and penalizing you for following clues that you should have realized wouldn't yield information. That's a very tricky thing to get right, especially in all of these games. It feels like any clue could yield you good information. But where Detective really had a very harsh way when you got to the end, the fact that this has got this soft ending very much ameliorates any concern I have with running out of time. But it does feel like, Jonathan, that should be the case, that there might be leads you would say, I'm not going to do this now. I'm not going to go for an interview or investigate now. But if I get reason further on to do something, I should do this. But one thing that it doesn't appear that the full game is going to do this, but this gets back to this question of the mechanic where you go to a place and it says, okay, you've discovered evidence S. So circle the S on your sheet. And then you might go somewhere that says, if you have an S, read this. there's no indication that there's going to be any of that in these games, but it would be nice if there was something you discovered that you could then, like, maybe you discover the combination and then you go to the room where the combination is. Jonathan says, to rephrase a little, based on what we played, did it ever feel like there was a reason to do both interview or investigate? Was it more about always picking the most optimal? That's a good question. Well, yes, that's a very good question. Let's think. In this game, if we take, for example, the boarding house, investigating gave us almost all the same information. They both gave us the same information. They each had a little bit different, though. When you talk to her, she tells you about who's in each room. She gave you a lot of information that you only get from talking to her, right? Which people were in which rooms. If you investigated that, you only got one little hint that wasn't present in the other in talking to her. And that was the hint about the dirt under the furniture. But so there was a case where there was independent information at both places. Just one had slightly more than the other. I can't remember if there are other places, like what was the morgue? If we had investigated the morgue, what would we have seen? If the morgue didn't have a place to investigate. But I see what you're saying, Jonathan. I think that that's an interesting question. And it's going to depend on the writer's skill, whether you should be able to infer what's the efficient use of your time. That's a very tricky thing to get right. Duke of Zil says, I get the feeling that these rules and maybe even some of the mechanics may change as you work through the 5 cases. Well, that's a great question. I look forward to finding out. We did get one little sneak in there. So even in the demo case, Gregory did sneak in a mechanic that was not mentioned, right? The fact that that number 1918, which we picked up, might be significant. The fact that you could look up that number does have a little show that Gregory's got a little sneakiness up his sleeve, some little tricks. So it wouldn't be too surprising if we saw something like that in the real game. And don't forget, the real game has maps with spatial locations that might be interesting, has multiple maps for different cases, has newspapers, we didn't mention that, has newspapers like Sherlock Holmes, and has some physical little props, some evidence props that you get out of an envelope or something. Jonathan says, another aspect of this, I guess I'm curious if there would be a case like the morgue where hypothetically we would talk to the mortician and at the time not seem super relevant and then later based on another clue come back. Yeah, well, that's going to depend on Gregory's writing. The game does say that the 5 cases, and it is interesting that it's 5 cases. Traditionally, the Sherlock Holmes boxes have all contained 10 cases, so it's not clear. I think the days of 10-case Sherlock Holmes are going to be over soon. These days, that is more game than you expect. And most of the Sherlock Holmes boxes are 10 cases, but partly it's 10 cases because they're reprinting old cases and sticking them in. Dave Neal's box may be the last extravagant case we get, where we get 10 full long cases. So half that many in Bureau of Investigation, but it's not at all clear if that's going to map to half the hours of play of a Sherlock Holmes traditional box, or if some of those cases were longer. So how long each case is, how much text there is to read, we won't know until we get the game in our hands. I believe Gregory was saying that this box was developed over the case, this game was developed over the case of 5 years, about 5 years, and the demo case only in a couple weeks. Yeah, can't wait to play it though. I mean, the idea of a longer case in the same flavor with some suspense is quite appealing. And again, we should give credit to Mythos Tales where it's due. That game does not get the love it deserves. It's a very full, fleshed out game. It's got a bunch of typos and fixes that make it a little bit of more work to play, but that is a game that also tried some new stuff, some clever stuff, tried to introduce some gaminess, and has 10 full, I believe it's 10 full cases set in this world of H.P. Lovecraft, and it deserves more play and love, and I hope we will play some more of it on the channel. Any other thoughts from Jonathan and Duke of Zill? While I'm waiting for Jonathan and Duke of Zill to come up with some more thoughts, since Gregory has not made it to the channel yet, which is fine, I'm going to talk a little bit about a discussion that he and I had about live streaming gameplay, and I'm going to try to sum up his basic view, but I probably won't do it justice. But we talked about live streaming these cases. I've played on the channel long Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective cases. We played Baker Street Irregulars cases. We played 4 or 5 of them for 8-hour streams. That was before the day of Jonathan, where I was just all on my own. But okay. In the Baker Street Irregular playthroughs, the game had been out for a little while before I did my playthroughs, maybe a year or so, or half a year. And when I was talking to Gregory about live streaming the cases, we talked about a number of problems, a number of concerns he had. He had a little bit of concerns about people who were playing through the demo case and maybe not having a great time or getting confused or not having read the rules. I haven't watched the other playthroughs. There's a French full playthrough. There's a English playthrough by the Gaming Rules channel that looks very... I love the way they do their playthroughs with a bit of a green screen. Anyway, point is, I don't know how that went, but Gregory had a little bit of concern, and you completely understandable, that some early videos of the game might discourage people from trying it, either because the video people playing it didn't have a great time, or etc. Okay, so those are valid concerns. I hope I've dispelled some of those concerns, at least if you've got tastes like mine in games. I can't wait to try this. But even if we had a bad experience, I don't think the demo case captures the full experience. Okay, but the other thing we talked about, though, was Gregory's feelings towards people live streaming a full case playthrough. The way we filmed full playthroughs of the Baker Street Irregulars box and the other out of prints. And I believe Gregory's opinion of this, as the author of this game, came down to something like this. He wouldn't mind it at all if such playthroughs happened after the game had been out for a while, a year or so. And he's very curious to watch, in the same way that Dave Neal watched our playthroughs of the Baker Street Irregulars and got to see how we encountered it. Gregory sounds like he's quite curious to see how we experience the game in our playthroughs. And it pays to remember that these are they're not only very, very hard games to design, because you're trying to balance the experience and the mystery and difficulty level of other people, but they're super difficult because it's very costly to have someone, not just in terms of money, but time, to have someone play test it. And they can only play test it once. You have to find a group that's willing to put in 5 hours. The kinds of people who play these kinds of games are a small group, and then they can only try it once, and then they've heard everything. It's not like a regular board game that can be play tested hundreds and hundreds of times by dedicated play testers. So very hard to play test. And then there's the fact that you can't play this game yourself. It's a very bizarre scenario where you're designing a game that you cannot play. And so Gregory was saying how, the way he has to experience is by seeing other people play it. Okay. But I take it that his concern is that if you have a full playthrough of the game, in the early days where the game has just come out, especially, that people might watch that instead of buying and playing the game. And that it would do two things. The first is it would be a little bit like a kind of piracy of a movie, where instead of buying the game, someone would be playing it by watching it instead of playing it. Not as bad as if someone scanned everything and downloaded it instead of buying it. But there would be that. So there's the issue of not buying the product from the author, but it's also the issue of, would it make the game not seem as popular or loved if someone watches a playthrough instead of playing it? And I think it's worth concerning. And the other thing Gregory was saying was that it's weird that someone would do this without asking permission of the author. And it gave me a little bit of pause. And I think it's worth thinking and talking about a little bit. Now, I have a slightly different take on that, and a slightly different take on piracy and the ethics of that in general. I mean, I'm a computer programmer. My software is available. All of the software I write is available for free, but I ask for donations, whatever. And so I'm interested in the ethics of piracy. And in general, I think separating ethics from legal things, I think ethically you should be paying the author for their work. We want a world where authors are financially compensated for their work, especially if you can afford it. I think the ethics get much more vague when you say, well, here's someone who's can't possibly afford it. Is there harm in them downloading a copy of a movie if they couldn't possibly either afford to see it or it's not available in their country, whatever? So I'm much more concerned with the ethics, and that's why I like the idea of Patreon and donation-based stuff where you pay what you can or whatever. Point is, I do believe you should be trying your best to support the work of authors. We want them to be able to make a living doing this stuff and rewarding them for their work. Okay, so there's that. My gut feeling is that people are not going to be watching an 8-hour live stream of a game like this is such a narrow niche. I mean, there's like 3-4 people who watch our long live streams. And that if you just try to imagine the number of people that would be watching it instead of buying it, that's such a small number. And even if there's a real number, right? Whatever that number is, whatever number N of the people that would watch 40 hours of live stream rather than buying that $40 game and playing it themselves offline, that number N is going to be much smaller than the number of people who tune in for 5 minutes and say, this is a cool game, I'm going to buy it. So no matter how much you run those calculations, I believe that the live playthroughs are going to be doing more good in terms of publicity than harm in terms of getting people that watch it instead of buying it. So from my standpoint, if your concern is that you'll lose sales, lose people, I think that's probably a miscalculation. probably by orders of magnitude. The number of people who will watch 5 minutes of the stream and see us having fun and find out about a game they never heard about and then go buy it is orders of magnitude higher than the number of people that are going to sit down for 40 hours and watch it instead of buying it. That's my view. And then you could add on top of that, those number of people, the small n, 5 people, who watch 40 hours of the game and love it and don't buy it, that number n of people are going to walk away having loved your work, known that they're going to look for more stuff you do and make and buy it when it comes out, recommend it to friends, etc. So, and maybe the people like me who live play it on the channel, well, I'm going to review it whether I live play it on the channel or not. But if you ask people not to live stream it on certain channels, you might be convincing those people that they can't even, that game is not useful for them for their channel. You could imagine a popular channel that's in it for views and etc. If they couldn't live stream a play of it, that means that game is not on their list of games to play or review. And a positive review would get you a lot of attention and spread word of mouth about the game. So even if the live stream cost you end sales, you probably want to trade that off for the possibility of getting a review from that channel. If not, live streaming it would mean that they don't review it. Now, of course, all bets are off the table if the people have a bad experience, but you can't control that. Just my 2 cents. However, I'm inclined to say, like, I really want to play this game. I would want to play it with Jonathan and Duke of Zil, etc. I don't think Gregory would have any objection to, Gregory doesn't have an objection to people playing it online. It's just sharing the playthrough. So if Gregory is unconvinced by my arguments and decides he would rather us not publicly have on YouTube a live stream playthrough for people to watch, we'll have to decide how to handle that here. Either we won't play it or wait a year or whatever, or we'll play it live and then take down the video so no one else can watch it. Again, I don't think that's the smartest calculation, but I'm inclined to follow the author's wishes. So we'll talk about that and follow up when the time comes, when I can get my hands on a copy. And I should say Gregory was very kind enough to offer to have Space Cowboys send us a copy. But my position on this channel is to accept nothing from anyone in any form related to the as authors of this. If someone at home wants to send in a game for us to play, that's fine. But I feel like I've just been talking one running sentence. I'll get to the chat in a second, but last little philosophical thing. It is nerve-wracking to think about being negative about a game when you've met the author and are talking to the author, or the author might be listening. So the main reason not to accept free games from a publisher or an author, one is you don't want to be biased. We all have unconscious biases. It can't be helped, so try to minimize that. Then you're also trying to minimize the appearance of bias, and that's also a concern. But then there's also the emotional toll of the possibility of being negative about a game that you're friendly with the author of. That's, for me, my main emotional fear. And we experienced a little bit of it with the the Portal games, Vienna Connection and Dune House Secrets, because when we did the live playthroughs of Vienna Connection, I loved it. And a couple of the authors stopped by at the end of some of those live streams, and we got to talk about how great it was. Then Dune House Secrets we played, and I really didn't like it. And the author stopped by, same author, stopped by at the end of that and basically stopped by to say hello, to remind us of something, and then left the channel without hanging around to chat for whatever reason. But the point is, it was awkward and uncomfortable to be saying that the game didn't work for me. And but I think there's no point in presenting reviews if you're not going to be negative about games that didn't work. And the solution to that is to just bite the bullet and accept that sometimes you're going to hurt someone's feelings, and that it's very hard to be a designer and put an artist of any kind and put your work out there, and that people are going to say bad things. Some are going to be informed and some not. And that's just the game you're in, and you have to be willing to take those hits and understand you're going to be creating new things. And if someone doesn't like one game, hopefully that won't mean they won't like another. You learn from it. And the other solution to that is to expect an audience, the audience that might be watching this, all 4 people, understand that one person's experience with a game does not determine how well you're going to like a game. And you shouldn't be taking any reviewer's word for anything. You just put it as one data point, especially for games like this. And my final comment on that is this. I had a friend that I played games here in Champaign many years ago in our game group named Dave Rogers, and he made a very insightful point, and that was that especially with works of art or board games, movies, you should be looking for those games that split opinions. If you find the game or the movie that everyone likes, you're finding a movie that is not going to be your favorite movie, probably, because when you try to please everyone, you have to cut corners and make compromises that won't end up being the best movie for a given person. So don't look for the games that have universal highest ranking for everyone. Look for those games that divide people, that some people love and hate. Those will be the special games. All right, let's go to the chat a bit. Duke of Zil says, some Sherlock Holmes case books are only 8 or 9 pages long. In Bureau of Investigation, each location have doubled the options. 5 cases in the system could have as much writing as 10 regular cases. Absolutely, we won't know until we get our hands on it. And then when we were talking about piracy and ever, Duke Zil says, in terms of similarities to pirating, I think there's a large difference between participating in a game yourself and watching others play it. Yes, I mean, I do think the piracy analogy, the clear analogy to that would be if you downloaded the scans of a game instead of buying it. And we've played a couple games now from the 30s, or out of print games where I have the original and someone playing along is using scans. But that's an out of print game. I think that's a very different thing where you really can't, practically speaking, buy your own copy, nor should everyone playing have to have their own copy. So I really do think that watching a live stream or playing along with the live stream is not analogous to pirating a movie. I really don't. I think you're experiencing it in a very different way, and it's not a replacement. But that's my personal opinion. I could see how an author would have a slightly different view. John says, to that point, seems several others enjoyed the story of Dune House Secrets more than we did. Yes, that's a good point. Well, Duke of Zil said, did they really? All right. Well, both things can be true. It is definitely true that, as a rule, Dune House Secrets got very negative reviews, very widely and generally speaking. Some people did like it, though. I do think with these mystery games, though, you really have to accept that you could have a very different experience than the people you're watching play them, based on your chain of reasoning, what paths you go down, whether your thoughts line up, etc. Lots of reasons for these mystery games that you might have a different experience. And I think this is something Greg pointed out early on, which I thought was very clever idea, which is that the idea that some of our long reviews that were an hour long, well, let me take credit first and then I'll give Greg credit. I'll take credit for the idea that I thought that the basics of this channel, the basic motivation for this channel would be people who play a game and want someone to talk to about that game, rather than people who want a quick recommendation. So rather than a 3-minute review saying this is a great game, go get it, we were going to do mostly content that's sort of like, after you play the game, you might come and sit with us as we go into depth about and talk about these mechanics of the games and what we liked and what would be different, so that it would be like having a friend that you could talk to about these games if you don't have someone to play with and talk to with. So Greg's little twist on that, which I think was very clever, was he was thinking of our reviews as being sort of before you buy it review and then an after you buy it review. So that's when we started doing quick before you buy it reviews, and those we really try to be concise and short. And then the much longer discussions that are called reviews, but are really maybe more suited for watching after you've already played the game and want someone to talk to about. And so when we do these live streams, we're sort of combining both. We're playing it and then we're spending a lot of time talking about it afterwards. Duke of Zill saying, Jonathan is talking more about Dune House Secrets. I don't mean that they love the game overall, but I think some of the other video reviews like the actual story all right. We found it interesting, but we didn't really love the story. Yes, that's true. There were a bunch of people regarding Dune House Secrets. We're definitely going off on a tangent, but this does come back to something that Gregory Privet, who designed Bureau of Investigation, talked about. There were a bunch of people that played the first case of Dune House Secrets and then put up a review of it. And one I'm thinking of was Board Game Talk Network or something. There's 4 of them. And they played it and they really liked it. They were intrigued and couldn't wait to go on. And I think, I don't think they ever have continued it. But Dune House Secrets was one of those games where you play the first mission and you're like, this didn't quite work, but maybe it's just getting started. But instead, it did not fix itself. So I could see how if you only played the first case, you might have a more positive thought going into it than if you played the whole thing. Duke of Zill says, the before you buy videos are helpful. I think not many channels frame videos in that way. I don't know if that's true. Our before you buy review videos are kind of like are what most reviews are. Most reviews are, well, I don't know most. There's lots of different board game content. One of these days, we're going to start having more chats about other video YouTube reviewers and grouching about them or whatever. I do a lot of hate watching, cringe watching of media in general, and the YouTube channels are no exception to that. And I think there's some people, we all have different tastes of what we like to watch, but there's some very fascinating psychology going on in videos. And since we're just talking amongst ourselves for no reason here, I'll talk a little bit about one. So there's a channel I watch. I mean, I watch a couple of channels just because it's like watching kind of like a train wreck. You can't look away and whatever. I've talked about Rob Oren's channel before, and I go back and forth. I mean, he seems like a nice guy, but he's a little bit of a bullshitter, and the whole social media world of YouTube, Twitter, whatever, seems to me full of people with mental problems in various ways. And I have to assume that I fall into that category as well. But okay, that's a little bit of a side. But now I'll tell you about this other channel I watch. All right, so there's a channel called Hoons Coffee, something like that, Hoons. There are a lot of channels dedicated to coffee and espresso in particular. And James Hoffmann is like the top echelon of the expert in coffee, and he produces very good videos and millions of subscribers. Talks very informatively about espresso and details of it. And he can taste the difference. He's got videos where you taste the difference between whether you stir espresso with a spoon or a fork, you know, that kind of stuff. It's ridiculous that you could taste the difference, but he's the expert. But now, so there's every reason to watch James Hoffmann videos and get a peek into like the top experts of espresso. And I've gone down the rabbit hole of espresso. I have an espresso machine now. I make espresso every day. I love it. There are some real subtleties to making it and some interesting science of it, etc. Okay, now, so if you look at Hoons Coffee, I'm going to switch here while I talk. This video channel is a gentleman who's not very informed on stuff, doesn't have discerning tastes, has like a million little gadgets for no reason that are, it's like 15 different plungers and anyway. It's not an expert in anything. Okay, but there's a very interesting thing that's happened. It's clear there's a real community that's developed over this channel. It's very personal and accessible. And I do think there's some analogy between watching a review, which is like a review designed to help you decide whether you should buy the game, that's very concise. It's not 4 hours long. It's 10 minutes, 8 minutes long, designed to provide you information, hopefully from an expert. And then there's the other kind of thing, like this channel, which feels much more like it's about hanging out with a friend, someone keeping you company. And as an introvert, someone who doesn't like spending time with real people, real humans in person that often, and hates the idea of just hanging out with someone without a plan. That's partly why I like board games, because of the structured social interaction. But it's clear there's a whole set of YouTube channels that are more about having friends, having someone to spend time with that is like the comfort of watching a show, like watching a sitcom. You can watch a bad sitcom, but you keep watching 10 episodes of it, all of a sudden you're attached. That's human nature, psychology. We bond to people that we spend time with. So this channel, this Hoons channel, he live streams twice a day, making a cup of coffee. You just watch him make a cup of coffee, talk about it. There's some insanity going on about where the psychology of coffee is like the psychology of wine. You read a piece of paper that says this coffee has notes of honeydew and plum and cotton candy, and you see someone sip it and say, I taste the honeydew, there's the plum, and there's the cotton candy. It's bizarre. And if you do the scientific studies of wine experts, they think a $3 bottle of wine is the $1,000 bottle. They think a blind taste tested, they can't tell the difference between a red and white wine. So there's a whole placebo effect stuff, but placebo effect is real. If you think someone tells you there's notes of honeydew melon in that cup of coffee, then you might taste the honeydew. But the point is really that people are there to share the time, and the fact that he's not an expert and that it's sort of unpolished, unpracticed is all the more charming. And soon, before you know it, you're watching this video every day of someone make a coffee and talk about the tasting notes. It's the world of YouTube and all that, and comfort watching is and cringe watching. So, and you also get the benefit. You can't watch James Hoffman videos for cringe factor. You can only watch it for expert. But it seems like maybe the less skilled you are, the more sort of unknowledgeable you are, you get double audience. You get sort of the audience of the beginners hoping to learn from you, but you also get the audience of people that are just watching it out of cringe factor. And the less polished and more flawed you are in a way, more makes you more relatable and more pleasant to hang out with. So there's something comforting in watching that. I think also, I'll make one more comment. I do think a big part of it, though, is also the drug addictive nature of coffee. That it turns out with anything that's a drug, like you read about people who shoot heroin and their kits, like anything that's proximal to getting your drug becomes potentiated and becomes has an opportunity for becoming ritualized and imbued with value. So whether you're shooting up heroin or preparing your espresso, all of the proximal steps to getting that coffee into your mouth, preparing the beans, grinding them, anything you can stretch out that process into a ritual and habit, and any device that comes into contact proximally with you getting that dose of that caffeine drug becomes potentiated and sort of ritually, almost religiously significant. So what you see is attempts to draw out the process. So why just pour ground beans to make your coffee if you can grind your own beans and stretch out that process and make the process of what cup you put in the beans and what grinder you use and what setting, anything you can do to complicate the process of making that cup of coffee has the potential for being valuable. And it's sort of done without people acknowledging that we're purposefully complicating this in order to get out more dopamine from it. Okay, so there you go. There's my philosophical, scientific theories of watching coffee YouTube and brewing coffee. I actually thought about, should I get a coffee? Should I bring an espresso machine on the table and then we make espressos? We try to combine espresso with board games. So each episode will make a different espresso and make espresso during the gameplays. By the way, you guys don't have to hang around for this. Feel free to leave at any time. Duke of Zil says, there's such a variety of ways to present a board game review. Some channels summarize the whole game in 3 minutes, and I can't understand why they'd bother. How can information be conveyed in such a short time? Yeah, I don't know. I'll tell you, to be completely honest, I think the written reviews, which are becoming less frequent now with YouTube, are so much more useful for me. If I'm thinking of a game, it's so much better to read a review where I can jump around and see the main points and skim it at my pace. And the written review is clearer. Like, that's those things where you realize, like, wait, are we going in the wrong direction? Like, the videos are the worst way to present a review. It's much better to present a review written with pictures. And yet we're moving away from that towards video, which gets you into personality and people trying to be entertained. There are lots of board review channels. Perhaps the most popular one, Shut Up and Sit Down, is all based on the idea of making it funny and entertaining, making it something you watch to be entertained. And then slightly down a notch from that is EFKA, and the other one, their reviews feel deeper to me. They're focused half on entertainment and jokes, but less slapstick and more about giving you some deep insights. Shut Up and Sit Down actually has some good deep insights too. Not infrequently, but it's polished to be entertaining and funny, and that doesn't really do it for me. But for me, the best way to get information on a review is written. So I wouldn't that would be a preferred way. But I appreciate the short reviews, and I think for me it helps. The real thing about watching someone deliver a review on YouTube is it's easier, quicker to make a review, and I think you get to know the person and their tastes, and then it becomes useful to you to know if they like the game or not. So if I know Z Garcia loves Pandemic and tends to like cooperative games and has similar taste to me, then when I see a review by him, that's more meaningful. So ostensibly this was to play the demo case, but we've really managed to go 3.5 hours. Small section of that playing the demo case, much bigger section just talking about the genre and some ideas, design ideas, and now we've diverted into coffee and YouTube and all that stuff. Jonathan Warner's making a joke about how I give away mentions. I never get any. That's an insider joke about the YouTube mention feature. That way you don't know. Jonathan says, have I seen Batman yet? Yes, I did see Batman. We're not going to give any spoilers away. No Batman spoilers, but I will just say I liked it a lot. I did not love it. I didn't feel like there's anything revolutionary about it. But I always give these the serious superhero movies that DC makes always get points for effort for me, because it's like in the Olympics difficulty level. Like I feel like it's very hard to do to make someone in a costume mask make a serious movie out of that. And I feel like Marvel took the easy way out. They just make it all like a wink, wink, nod, nod. This is all silly. And I think that's the easy way to go. And so while I'm watching Batman, I'm just thinking, thank God I'm not watching a Marvel slapstick. Every other joke is a one-liner. I'm not a fan of that. I want my serious, dark stuff. So for that, I was just happy through the whole thing. I thought a lot of it worked well. I loved the look of it. It had, going into it, it had a little Seven vibe, which I love. And I think that was true. But I also think like the cinematography and the coloring, the color grading and everything had a real sort of Drive vibe. Another amazing movie, Drive, that I really liked. So I really liked it. Was I a fan of Logan? I wasn't a super. I liked it, but I didn't really get into it. You know, it's weird, but X-Men were the comic I really read growing up. Wolverine was never my favorite, never close to it. I liked Nightcrawler. So the focus on Wolverine and all of the X-Men movies I don't like. They just don't match my childhood memories. And so especially like the little kid versions, like the youth X-Men. So I'm not really, the X-Men doesn't quite do it, but I prefer Logan to the X-Men. I do much rather have Logan to the X-Men. And I do like some of the satirical superhero, the adult satirical superhero stuff, like The Boys, the series The Boys. I love the graphic novel and I love the TV show. But that is humor and satire at a completely different level, doing something completely different than the Marvel movies. The Marvel movies are kid-friendly slapstick one-liners, not satire, not adult, not making interesting satirical commentary. The Boys is a very adult, sophisticated, satirical, cutting, dark humor that I loved. I loved The Boys. I loved Irredeemable. I think I loved Irredeemable most, but The Boys I really liked too. And the show is amazing. And maybe if you want, we could talk about the cartoon. They spun off a cartoon of the boys, what would you call it? A little bit like Love and Robots. Each episode is by a different writer with different artists in a different style. And I thought the first episode of The Boys Diabolical, they call it, was really good. It was sort of filmed in old Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny style, and clever and smart and funny. And I thought the other episodes had missed the mark, were poorly had missed in tone. An anthology, yeah, and just missed the tone. Didn't land. We're trying to be clever, but weren't, or trying to be edgy and weren't trying to be. Just didn't quite work for me, but I like the idea. Blade Runner 2049. Yes, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Blade Runner, and I did like the new versions of it. Yes. Not my favorite movies, but loved it. Loved the look of it. It's hard to compete with the real Blade Runner, though. Has anyone seen... I'm thinking of Rutger Hauer from Blade Runner. Has everyone here seen The Hitcher? The Hitcher is like one of those cult movies that's pretty amazing. If you haven't seen The Hitcher, I recommend it. Here's another random thought. Either of you read Department H? I have seen it. I've seen it on Amazon, but I have not. Yeah, you guys should check out The Hitcher. It's not related to anything we've seen, but it's pretty cool. Okay, well, I'll need more. I need more time to think of my favorite movies, but I will mention. I'm going to give you a recent one that you've probably heard of, and then I'm going to give you a completely obscure one that's related to it. So, Don't Look Up was a Netflix movie very recently with Jennifer Lawrence. Speaking of Jennifer Lawrence in our last video. And what's his name? Who I think is underrated. Not that he's very underrated, but I think he's a really good actor. And a real pleasure to watch him act and speak. And what's his name? Who's the guy I'm thinking of in Don't Look Up? Don't Look Up is a satirical... Leonardo DiCaprio, that's right. Okay. He plays a professor in this one. There's nothing amazing about his performance in this one, but it's good, and he's got good comedic timing in here. But I would definitely recommend Don't Look Up. It feels different. It feels like it's being helmed by someone with a real style. And in fact, I'm gonna give you a whole bunch of stuff now. I'm gonna give you a very cool word to look up. The word is auteur. I don't know. I may not be pronouncing that right. Autere, meaning. And I'll let you look up what that means. But it's a word that you read, but sometimes you don't. You read and you kind of you understand enough about what it means in context to not really know the real definition. Auteur or auteur. Anyway, it's actually a very useful word for some of these movies. And it's someone who produces artwork in a style that is of their own, is recognizably of an author's style, of an artist's style. So there's some movies that you see that you're like, oh, I can see just by watching that that's a David Lynch movie. He's got a style of his own that I can see. Okay. So Don't Look Up, I really liked. And it had some a comedic, yes, exactly like Tarantino, exactly. So he's an auteur, or however you pronounce it. Okay. Okay. What was I saying? So Don't Look Up had a sense of comedic taste that felt slightly different and good, consistent and good. And but the obscure movie that's sort of related to that I really want to recommend, that is low budget. You shouldn't go into it expecting anything, but is worth watching, is called Miracle Mile. That's a movie we stumbled on when we were kids, so it's got to be from the 80s, probably. Late 80s or so. And it's a pretty cool movie. I would definitely recommend it. Different movie. Now, spinning off on our little side notes about Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio did a couple movies that are just enjoyable to listen to him talk. And one of them is Blood Diamond, which Jonathan Warner has seen Miracle Mile. Okay, nice. Blood Diamond, Leonardo DiCaprio has an accent, and for some reason I could just listen to that all day, listen to his character speak. And he does a couple others where he's got that flavor. There's certain movies that I just like watching because I like listening to the actors' dialogue, and that's one of them. Duke of Zill is pointing out that Don't Look Up was directed by the same person who did The Big Short, which is an amazing movie and has some dialogue that really feels smart and clever. Johnson says, just to make sure, it's same Miracle Mile 1988. Yep, that's going to be it. Duke of Zill says Zimbabwe accent and Blood Diamond. Yeah, like that's a case where maybe if you're from South Africa, you listen to that and you cringe, like that's not quite right. But for my ears, it's exciting to hear that the accent and the slang that he uses in that. And there's some cool scenes in that I really like. And if I'm obliged to give a samurai movie each stream, I'll give you one, Harakiri. The original Harakiri, there's a remake. I don't know if I think I've seen the remake, but the original black and white one is a very slow burn of a movie, but has some very cool scenes, and I would highly recommend it. I'm trying to remember what the other Leonardo DiCaprio movie that I was so taken by. It wasn't a great movie. It might be... Is Ron good? Yeah, Ron is good. Ron is absolutely good. It's hard to find a bad Akira Kurosawa movie. Even the samurai ones are all amazing, although they've got slow moments that you would never get away with in a normal American movie now, like a 5-minute scene of people lost in a misty forest. But Ron is very, very good. So is Hidden Fortress, Seven Samurai, maybe one of the best 5 movies ever made. But Ron, yeah. Ron is good. But even some of Akira Kurosawa's non-samurai movies, High and Low, I've recommended already, is one of my favorites. But he also has some sweet ones like Ikaru, Ikiru, which is much more of a character study. Redbeard is similar. All worth watching. Just settle yourself in for a slower pace for some of those. Duke of Zill is listing some other Leonardo DiCaprio, Body of Lies, Catch Me If You Can, The Revenant. Well, I mean, all of those are good. I think Body of Lies might be the one, though, that is not the best movie, but is the one where I like listening to Leonardo DiCaprio dialogue, listening to the way he talks in that movie. I think that might be the other one that I really like. Jonathan's saying Akira Kurosawa may have been working on an adaptation of Red Mask of Death. I don't know that. All right. Final thoughts. We're approaching almost 4 hours. So final movie thoughts, recommendations from the rest of the channel. I've said too much already. I have to save some of these to sprinkle out. Definitely not Great Gatsby. No, it was Body of Lies is the other one where it's just fun to listen to Leonardo DiCaprio talk and get upset with the other guy who's running the operation, who's also a very fun actor to listen to. John says, I recommended it before, but I recommend Black Coal Thin Ice. Well, I've already watched Black Coal Thin Ice, Jonathan, and I liked it a lot. Quirky and very cool. So you got to come up with another one to recommend, Jonathan. I recommend, I got to stop. I've recommended enough. But Jonathan, you could come up with another one because you already used up Black Coal Thin Ice. I've already watched it. Okay, Duke of Zill is recommending Prisoners and The Prestige. Yes, I've seen both of those. I think Prisoners, they're both good. They're both good. Prestige is good and strange. Both good. Well, we managed to stretch this out to 4 hours. Jonathan says, I like Black Coat's Daughter. Black Coat's Daughter, go in thinking of it as a thriller. Okay, I'll check that one out. Black Coat's Daughter. There Will Be Blood. Yes, well, There Will Be Blood is great, but There Will Be, yeah, that's a great movie. For sure. For sure, that's a great movie. All right, looks like that's the final